What's up, everybody? Welcome to a late night Saturday rant here on Logical, Plausible, Probable. I've actually been running around like a crazy person today because my laptop that I've been using for all my live streams has gone completely haywire. And tomorrow, myself and SFT have a debate over on Modern Day Debate against Fight the Flat Earth and Team Skeptic on creation versus evolution. So I've been trying to figure out a way like, hey, what am I going to do to make this work? So I have been figuring out some ways to jury rig. If you guys saw what I had to do to figure this out, so I've now jury rigged my Note 10, connected it to my Bluetooth or to my Blue Yeti mic, and got a adapter that lets me have it plugged in as well, so I can get juice. And then I'm got the adapter, I've tested it out, and I'm trying to figure out a way to get it to work with all the other things and be able to actually connect to my Ethernet, which would make it pretty crazy. So I'm actually doing this from my phone, but being able to use my my normal mic, which is kind of crazy. But I just wanted to let everybody know tomorrow should be pretty nuts. I'm anticipating a pretty strong, energetic interaction, shall we say, with Team Skeptic and Fight the Flat Earth. It's been coming for several weeks now. They actually canceled twice. According to James, everything's been confirmed for tomorrow. So should be kicking off at about 3 p.m. Tomorrow. And those guys don't like to have normal dialogue. So I'm anticipating we'll have a pretty robust interaction back and forth and see who ultimately comes out on top with that particular showdown. But one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight real quick is I just left my good buddy Smokey Saint, and he was able to celebrate his 200 subscribers. Pretty awesome. So if you guys are don't know about him, make sure you go over and check out Smokey Saint. Awesome guy, doing some great stuff. We have some fun philosophical discussions, and to use his favorite word, likes to unpack the atheist worldview mindset and really dive into some of the craziness that they like to get into. Now, in a few minutes, I'm going to put up the link in chat if anybody wants to come in and have some conversation. Let's see if I can figure out to do this from my phone, actually. It's kind of crazy what I've been doing. All right, let's see if this will work here. Guess, invite a guest, copy clipboard. Cannot believe I'm doing this from my phone. Okay. Oh man, well, let me type it. Dang it. All right, hang on. All right. Okay. I think I've got it working again now. Yes. All right, so enough of that. I am back. Let me know if anybody wants to come in. Okay, we got a guest. Let's see. So Smokey saying, "What's up?" Add to stream.
Of course, me to bug
What's
you.
up, brother? How you doing?
What's up, man? How you doing? I just had to come and thank you personally for such an awesome contribution and a really cool stream tonight, man. It was killer.
Man, I really enjoyed that. That was a fun one for sure. I was really enjoying listening to you guys. I was while y'all were talking after I left. I was still listening. I was sitting there trying to figure out how to jury rig all this stuff together. And
Right. Well, it looks like you're managing.
yeah, well, so far the I've got to get. I'm hoping my other adapter will come in. I ordered from Amazon. And if it
Oh,
will,
beautiful.
then it'll enable me to have my mic, power, and Ethernet all
Oh, sweet.
set up simultaneously to my Note 10, and I was also doing a test with because obviously MDD will be on Zoom.
Mm,
So with one of the things I was really trying to figure out is like how the heck am I going to do a presentation during my opening statement tomorrow
right.
from my phone, right? Well, I'm like, okay, let's test. I've been playing with the share screen option with the Zoom app,
Mm.
and it seems to be working. I got Nicholas here. Hang on one sec.
Well, thank God, at least you're up and running for the most part.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, hey, it is what it is. Got to get creative when
I
you have
cannot.
24 hours.
Yeah, you know what? I cannot believe how incredibly excited I am for your debate tomorrow. Like seriously, like more than any of my own debates. I'm like, oh, Maddox, I'm ready. Take him to school, man. I can't wait.
Well, so it was kind of interesting to me uh, as I was trying to figure out a way to pull this off, right?
Mm.
I was driving around, and earlier I was making the point about like the lack of atheist critical thinking skills.
Mm.
But part of where that came from was I was contemplating while I was driving and trying to figure this stuff out. I was also contemplating like where the whole aspect of like free will and no original thought and the ramifications of all that if we don't have free will.
Mm.
And as I was sitting there like trying to think of creative ways to solve the problem that I was facing, there were different concepts that popped in my head. I was Googling them, see, oh, is this an option? Is this an option? Is this an option? And
Mm.
then something completely alternative would pop into my head as and I'd go and research that. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, okay, none of what I am trying to accomplish has yet occurred. And I have never before faced this challenge.
Mm.
So before I'm going to research to find out if it is possible, I am having the idea about something that has not yet occurred. And now I'm searching for the solution. Now obviously in this context, it's technical solutions, all those kind of things, but it still required creativity in order for me to determine how I'm going to pull it off, because I personally have never done it before. Right.
Mm.
And that premise to me, I feel like is completely, I love your opinion on this, both you and Nicholas.
Mm.
To me, that seems like if you're going to disregard the kind of things I just talked about, you're completely ignoring what makes you human and what is the foundational elements of consciousness. Does that make sense?
In a way, yes. What I've kind of noticed, which is interesting to me, and maybe on a philosophical level, but there seems to be this necessity to almost connect. I don't know. Nihilism might not even be the right, really fitting descriptor here, but nihilism and determinism, like almost as if your brain is just a bunch of chemical reactions. It's a bunch of matter with a bunch of chemicals happening there, and that is instigating experiences that we are perceiving and interpreting and quantifying. But as it gets kind of sticky, but the thing is too is if you're kind of setting the idea that all of this is just chemicals, all of this is just matter, then the existence of free will and also even identity is really kind of just an illusion. It's an illusion of the chemical reactions. Like where some of the atheists will say that the experience of love is tantamount to what you experience with heavy doses of chocolate. Now, that's not true. And if they do believe that, I'm sad to think what they actually believe love is, because love comes from an actual, benevolent, self-sacrificial action that infuses you with something of a consideration for someone other than yourself. So, it's this obsession to want to simplify the complex so that they can rationalize it into what seems to be a naturalistic paradigm. I can't seem to find any other justification for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I well, actually, with my knowledge now, I don't really accept the whole "oh, we're nothing but chemicals" position that's taken by the atheists in terms, even on just like the normal bodily functions.
Mm,
But when you try to apply that to the brain and neural function,
mm.
to me, you are just
It's a
going
reach.
to
It's a
such an
reach.
extreme
Yep.
of, and then the thing that really blows my mind and irritates me, blows my mind, and fires me up of just like wanting to counter them with aggression is when they argue that there is no information processing occurring
Oh, yeah. That's
and I'm like, what is thought? I mean, I I don't understand what else could be considered this.
yeah.
When you really dive down to the root of it, it's like, okay,
Well, and so many of them.
if our brain is processing information in
Mm,
order for us to have consciousness and us to have a thought and to write anything down or to produce our own information, then and if that is purely being accomplished by the chemical process, then
mm.
how do you argue that there is not also chemical processing information processing being done on the cellular level?
No, absolutely.
I mean, to
No,
me, it's just
absolutely.
a like, how do you think we're doing this? You know?
It's just constantly reaching towards the improbable, and it's weird because you know it does. It's a very, very logical stance, in my opinion, to say it really does take a lot of empty faith to be an atheist in many regards. You have to have incredible faith in the massive gaps of knowledge and information that we have, that somewhere in there lies the answer to solve the problem of whether or not a god is essential, and in the process of doing so have ignored the mountain of evidence we have come across already to show that a god is essential. I mean, now, again, like I was kind of pointing out earlier today, how do we even know we're dealing with rational people anymore, sir?
Well, no,
Once they
I would have to
say,
agree. Oh, go ahead, Nicholas.
yeah, once they say that it's not information, I mean that's just um a semantic claim, and it's just nonsensical. At that
Agreed.
point, like logically, they've conceded everything, and at that point, I see why you would get frustrated on that level, because at that point, that person's not worth talking to. Bottom line.
Well, the irony is that it's a huge portion of the atheist activists take
It
that
is.
position.
Yeah.
And for example, you used a
Because
great word of,
atheism is desperate.
but you used a great word in which you guys have all heard me rant about in a variety of contexts. But you used a great word of semantics, right?
Mm.
And when you apply that to information, of it's like, okay, is there is there random information? Yes. Is there also functional information? Formal functional information? Yes. Is there specified information? Yes. Is there descriptive information? Is there prescriptive information? Yes. And it's like, okay, when you start to go down that rabbit hole, and this is to the whole aspect we're talking about of
Wait a minute, John. I still don't have evidence of information.
Yeah. But to me, when you think about this in context, I always say this in the context of what is the source origin requirement for those different types of information. And they want to argue that from a physics perspective, there's nothing different. Okay, fine, whatever. You want to argue it from that perspective, go for it. That still doesn't change the fact that there's different information structures that, from a semantic perspective, or syntactic and semantic perspective, that result in alternative pragmatic outcomes.
Mm.
And the irony for me is that we do not dispute this reality in any other context except for in biology.
Mm.
And specifically in the context of the source requirement.
Mm.
And to me, that's one of the reasons I argue so strongly about the willful suspension of rational thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, would you make this exact same argument that you're making right now in any other perspective about something as simple as a piece of paper that was written on with a pen, and now there was a chemical process that bound the ink to the pen, but you would never argue that the meaning of those words was purely as a result of the chemical reaction.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's still physically, it's not any different. It's still physics. It's molecules. That's all it is. So it's not information. Why would we even think that?
Yeah. And that desperation to just avoid the root recognition that is required, to me, is just it's the exemplification of desperation at that point. Because if you're not, if you're going to go through and the irony is that it extrapolates all the way into the highest levels of academia. In even those that acknowledge the requirements are still desperately searching for alternatives of why this wouldn't be the case in the single most important contingent of the usage. I mean, it blows my mind. I mean, as we were talking, Smokey, I don't know, but you saw the trash talking from Speed of Sound in the chat earlier.
I saw a little bit of it, but I wasn't paying close attention.
It was cracking me up as usual, of course. But it's like, man, I know, and it's a sidebar, and I don't mean this is not direct. Immutable is growing on me, so I'm not bashing him on this one. But I find it very interesting listening to his interactions with you versus his interactions with me, because that man has taken polar opposite positions in a variety of elements about existence when he's talking with me versus when he's talking with you. And I'm like, okay, so have I just like knocked his shields down? Now he's being reasonable with you? Or
it could be. Well,
I mean, I'm being facetious. I'm too arrogant. I'm not arrogant.
I wouldn't think you're. I don't think you are being facetious. And in fact, that's actually even more, a little more to my point tonight with rage. What if the only thing I had come along to do with Raging Atheist was just to correct him a little bit, make him a little afraid, and now he's going to approach these topics with a little bit more respect. Maybe that's all I accomplished. And you know what? If I did, great. Maybe if the only thing you accomplished with Speed was knock down some of his, barriers or boundaries or presuppositions about his worldview so that someone else can come along. I mean, we're all tools of the Holy Spirit, each of us for a different time, for a different purpose. We just have to open ourselves to that. And each of us are probably going to interact with different atheists at each time. Now, let's be real. There's zero chance of me ever converting Rage, right? Let's operate in a realm of reality here, okay? But that doesn't mean that I didn't completely put him in a stance of maybe a little bit of respect for what he's saying about other cultures and other people. Now he'll approach it differently. Maybe later on down the road, he has a conversation with the Christian who can convert him. Maybe someone softer that manages to speak to him just in the right way. And then the totality of the work of the Holy Spirit has been completed.
Yeah, and I got to say that anything can happen, and Christianity is so powerful and Christ is so powerful. Like, who would know 2 years down the road, like what kind of dialogue would develop and what might happen in his life, some kind of breakdown.
Exactly.
I mean, it's it's possible you could convert him, Smokey. I mean,
well,
reality may not be able to hold evolutionism, but it is able to hold Rage going through something, and somehow it's possible.
I think I made it clear.
The tool.
I think I made it clear on the stream tonight. I'm happy to have a respectful dialogue if he stops this nonsense. If he stops attacking my book, my culture, and my people, we'll be okay. We can start having some actual exchanges if he wants to engage that way. But if he wants to be a raging vitriolic moron, then he's going to get treated as such. I think I was pretty clear about that. I mean, I want to have good, positive, respectful conversations with people. I do. That's actually the goal, by the way. But I have to sludge through a lot of garbage before I can get there.
Well, I think a portion of it stems his kind of using, not stereotyping, but sort of raging atheist of, I think they're so unfamiliar with a quote unquote Christian being willing to fight back.
Exactly. No.
And not just because the thing is, there's a difference between turning the other cheek and responding
and enabling.
Right. And that's one of the things that just frustrates the heck out of me about some people, especially more like in the quote unquote progressive church.
Mm.
I had a whole back and forth with this guy on Twitter a while back about some of these different topics, and I mean, he was so adamant that we are supposed to have no interaction with the world, that we're supposed to just let anything happen.
No,
And
we are supposed to
it
be
got all
in
the
the
way
world.
to and it got all the way to the point of me saying, okay, are you telling me that if your wife, sister, mother was being raped in front of you, you would not use violence to stop that person?
Exactly.
And they
Exactly.
literally responded that no, it was not there. And I'm like, yeah, I'm calling complete BS on you.
Yeah.
There is
No.
no way you are human if you would be letting somebody just be like, no, I'm not gonna do anything about it.
It does say in the Bible, whoever does not protect their family is worse than a heathen. So you know what? There's something to be said for us knowing exactly. You know, here's the thing: there's nothing wrong with us laying ourselves down for the sake of others, but us expecting other people to lay themselves down is a completely different story. When we see our brothers and sisters attacked, we should be inspired to rise up. We should be inspired to come to their defense, especially if they might be a little bit softer or maybe not prepared. That's what I believe people like us are for.
Well, I agree with you on that. And the other thing, one of the other things too, I've been thinking about a lot, and oh man, it's David Wood, Act 17 apologetics.
Absolutely. Oh, love him.
One of his debates, or after one of his debates, he talked about how there's sections of the church, if you will, that come after him for his aggression towards Islam.
Right.
And of course, in the context of culture and language and everything else, they actually respond to. But you know, he was talking about the mockery aspect. Oh, you shouldn't mock people. And he was going through some of the different aspects of where Paul and did so.
Oh, yeah.
And the point, you kind of made this point a minute ago, of it's not what you're supposed to do in every context. I'm not supposed to be running around just being like, "Hey, morons! You know,
Yeah, no,
believe, or you're an idiot." You know,
yeah, it's not good to be Darth Dawkins. Don't be Darth Dawkins.
I mean, there's a difference to it, but at the same time, especially and I view a lot of the folks that we're going up against, I view them as not just neutral parties, but enemy combatants. And if they are, I made the point earlier of, I think not all, but a huge portion of the atheists, especially the activists, they are not just atheists; they are anti-theist.
Oh, absolutely.
And therefore, if you are anti, that means you are against me. And in the context that we're talking about, you are in favor of the destruction of other souls.
Amen.
Therefore, you are now the enemy.
Amen.
And
that's, you know,
I will say you can surrender to Jesus and then you become an ally. But until that point, you are an enemy.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Nicholas. I'm sorry.
I got into a little bit of an argument with someone who was calling herself Beelzebub, and it was regarding the 10 Commandments, just like a technical thing. But after I totally wiped away her argument, or actually sounds like it could easily be the name of someone who's trans, but I was just like, yeah, I committed some pretty hard mockery, because it's like that name, it just totally reminded me of like those who went up against like Elijah and like that kind of thing. And like, yeah, it's that whole choosing a name to say I am your enemy. You know, that's not even like that person's own identity. They're defining their identity by naming themselves that they're mocking the one true God.
Well,
you know, yeah, I totally busted out the mockery, and it was pretty harsh, and I haven't heard back yet.
Well,
anyway.
you know that I actually had an opportunity a couple years ago. I got to speak at a conference, and the business conference, and there was a Christian group there as well, and I spoke at one of their events. Anyway, what I talked about was Elijah, and how in business, you know, we've got opportunities to, you know, we have all these people that are looking up to us, and if you're a business owner or a high level manager, you're like you have your whole team that is dependent on you and your decisions in many aspects, not everything obviously, but in many that you are. And I talked about it in the context of Elijah, of, you know, we, especially in this day and age, we're so conditioned to just acquiesce. whether it be to outside forces, politics, all these different things. Yet we've been given positions of leadership. So why then is it our standard modus operandi to concede? And then talk about Elijah. It's like, what greater challenge example is there? He's on the top of a mountain with 300 enemies, the kings. He calls them out, and all the way to the point of, I have so much confidence that I am correct that I will gamble my life, which in reality, that's what he was. Let's get real. If fire had not come down from heaven and burned up the sacrifices and scorched the stone, they would have killed him.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it was 400 false prophets. It was definitely false prophets, not kings, but I want to say it was 400. I know it wasn't 300. But I guess that's trivial, but
yeah,
I forget. It's like I forget the number. Yeah, it was 300 or 400. Yeah, I agree. Priests and false prophets. I agree with you.
Right.
But I mean, when you think about what he did, it's like, hey, not only am I willing to do this, let's dig a trench and let's fill it with water. Like, I mean, that's like a straight up. I mean, if that's not I'm bigger than you, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Of course, in this context, it's my God is bigger than your God, and let's go toe to toe and see where the fire falls.
Exactly.
And when you think about that, and Elijah prayed and called down fire, and it's like nuke comes in and destroys it, and it takes out the whole deal.
Well, and by the way,
but where I'm ultimately going with this is, yeah, that's all cool, right? It's easy to get distracted by that portion of it, but then it's the after effect. What happened? There was a line of demarcation, and the entire paradigm shifted from Elijah was the guy being mocked to, oh wow, we must all surrender and shift, and that was the dynamic that changed because of him being willing to do so.
And he was able to give an order to have them all killed. So there must have been a crowd much larger than 400 present at the event.
Well, yeah, there probably. I mean, I'm sure there probably were lots of Israelites there, but he did also lead into it with some mocking. This is and this is an interesting cultural thing to realize too, especially for northern Canaan. Baal is basically the primary deity of all of northern Canaan, secondary to Moloch, of course, or primary to Moloch, whichever way it was. But, there was a fixation on the idea, and even throughout Jewish culture, that Baal was basically the enemy of Yahweh. There is this claim that always throughout in Jewish history and culture, that Baal was kind of an equivalent god to Yahweh, and certainly that's what the Canaanites were trying to push and present. And so this was kind of that ultimate showdown challenge, which is such an important, incredible cultural event, especially for the Jews, because here's this idea of them integrating these false idols, these false gods into their religion, putting faith in them. Here's Elijah showing up, making the most difficult test possible, and then asking all of them, 400 whatever they were, all of them, go pray, do your sacrifices, cut yourselves, do your bloodletting, all the things that you guys do to worship your horrible God. And I'm just going to stand here and wait and sit here and watch and enjoy the show and occasionally taunt you by saying, where is your God? Has he gone to relieve himself in the bathroom? I mean, he pours salt in the wounds. And then at the very, very end, when they're exhausted, wore out, lapsed in faith, he just calls down, Lord, to your glory, and here it is. And it falls from heaven, ignites everything, tears it up. And rightfully so, they all needed to be killed. And praise God, what a miraculous story.
And that's the story of our life, really, especially with how they and you're using propaganda to unleash riots and stupidity to like normal people who would normally not be so stupid and riotous.
Indeed. No.
That whole deal with the riots and everything is just, it's so obvious that it's the usage of pawns by a higher archetype that is leveraging the stupid to fulfill their ends, which in this context is chaos.
Is there tinfoil behind that remote control, behind that Nintendo remote? I'm just being funny. I totally agree 100%.
Man, I tell you what, it's been very interesting. So, like in Nashville, where I live, we had a riot. Not too bad of one, but we had one a couple weeks ago. And so I live about 2.5 miles from where it went down. But I used to have a business that was literally 100 yards from where the city hall was, and where he like set on fire and the armored cars were, and all the riot police shooting, smoke, tear gas and flashbangs and everything. And so I was like watching it live on Periscope and that kind of stuff. And it was very interesting observing that whole dynamic, and then seeing, like watching stuff burn that I was very familiar with, and then watching these people like scoot down 3rd Avenue past where my business was and shoot a couple more blocks down to where I'd been doing some other stuff, business wise, down on Broadway, and like literally smashing in windows of businesses of the owners who I know personally,
Oh my gosh.
and like watching these insane punks, running in and out with freaking cowboy boots.
Yeah.
I mean, stealing cowboy boots, right? Yeah. And then breaking into a Margaritaville. It's like, what are you going to steal from Margaritaville? Like, you idiots didn't even steal the good stuff. But you jacked it up so much that the inside of the building ended up getting jacked up because the alarm and they try to start a fire. So it turned on the
sprinkler system.
The sprinkler system and stuff.
Yeah.
So there was more damage from the sprinklers going like for 5 hours straight than from the fire itself.
Yeah.
And the restaurant still shut down.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like, what is going on? And then now, I've actually been checking this out for the last couple of weeks. I've been driving once a day. I like zip past the Capitol building, and there's like this group of idiots out there standing face to face with the state troopers that are having to guard the Capitol building because these people are like standing across the street yelling at them, and then a couple of them will like walk across the street, get in their face, and start yelling. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what does this have to do with like making any significant impact on society or having a real expectation of making change? You're going to stand here and yell at people who have zero power to do the things that you are demanding. Like, in what other universe would it make sense to go yell at the guy who can't do anything about it?
I feel like we have some sort of like massive amount of like undiagnosed autism in our society. Like, that we just have a huge chunk of severely mentally ill people running around that we have not diagnosed with anything, and we just consider them as rational people that we should regard as opinions to consider, and we might be completely wrong about that.
That's related to the devil and to ego. Like it's not autism, it's the devil.
Oh, that's probably a fair consensus as much as mine. So yeah, I couldn't disagree.
Well,
also,
I think
talking about Elijah, like then afterwards, the thing was even though he was able to command that they were slain, so whatever was going on with that crowd who saw it, it was a big deal to them. Like, it didn't change anything about his socio-political situation. The change he was hoping for, like in the religion of his land, didn't come, and he despaired. That's when he went to the mountain, and God first he came by in 3 ways. I don't remember the exact order.
Right.
One was an earthquake, and one was a whirlwind. I don't remember the other one.
It was a still small voice. It was a whisper.
Yeah, I think that was after the 3, but maybe that is the one. But yeah, and then the still small voice comes in. Jehovah tells him that he has reserved 7,000. Like, you think you're alone, but you're not. And this is,
right.
This is what it's going to be for us. Like, we're not going to, like, we're casting down fire, but it's not going to save the day. And by that story, we know not to be disheartened. And like, there's 7,000 of us, and in literal numbers, it's probably a lot more than 7,000. But it's
God, I hope so.
Here we are with each other. It's like I was up there on the mountain alone before, but now I'm starting to find you guys. I really appreciate that.
Beautiful, brother. Glad to hear that.
It's interesting. The talking about the aspect of being alone. The one of the so after my brain surgery and stuff, the one of the things I joke about is that I went through a mini version of the trials of Job, and one of the aspects of that was pretty much everybody who I'd considered a friend vanished, and the I found myself trying to figure out what I was going to do next, and all those kind of aspects of life. But it was also the okay. I was faced with the am I alone and am I dependent on other people, or am I secure in myself because not because of my own ego, but because God is with me.
Mm.
And the reason I say that is, up until that point, I had the ultimate confidence in myself because I was able to overcome challenges. Things that I faced, I went out, figured out a way to solve the problem and win. Suddenly, physically, I wasn't in a position to do that anymore at that time in life while doing recovery and everything. And so the whole aspect of that ultimate confidence, God made it clear to me that that can be taken away from you in any moment. So now what are you left with? And the fast forward to now and the things I've learned since that whole time frame, that premise has become more rooted in my mind and just the way I try to operate. But beyond that, it has enabled me, my knowledge of that experience from an experience perspective enables me to really observe the gigantic number of people on both the believer side and the non-believer side, but obviously much greater than the non-believer side, who they have no ultimate confidence. They do not have the strength that we almost take for granted because we know that God is on our side.
Mm.
And I think it's very easy to forget that, either from ego and becoming overconfident, or from just not having that confidence that comes from. I mean, you think about it, what is a greater purveyor of confidence than knowing that the ultimate is on your side.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, that is
And
a
that brings
big
the
part of it.
peace, right? The shalom. Like it's easy to have shalom at all times because of that.
Well, it's a knowledge of the presence, and then the knowledge of the presence, we attain a certain validation about our reality and our existence that the secularists could only dream of having.
That's very true. What's up, Jessi? How you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Good evening.
Good evening. I've not seen you before.
Me, Smokey?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I'm new to the block. I've only been around for the last couple months.
What? I've only been around for the past couple months.
Oh, okay. Well, then you know what? We're just converging. That's just how it's happening. Synchronicity. Blame it on
Right?
that.
We're the two new
So,
kids on the block. Yep.
There you go.
so Jessi, Smokey, and I have done 2 debates. We've got a third one coming up. Our challengers, RIB, which stands for Religion is BS, and Mike, the Canadian Atheist. We just did last Sunday. Yeah, we did round 2, and then they challenged us to round 3 of what's the exact topic, Smokey? It's conventional
Secular
morals.
morality versus Christian morality.
Oh dear.
Yeah, they don't even know what they're walking into. It's going to be glorious. If you thought the last 2 were entertaining, oh my, just wait till what happens next.
Well, and we all know this, so I'm just repeating something that we already know, but they actually have to borrow morals from us.
Mm.
And it cracks me up every time, I hear my class at my college, they talk about, select morals here and there, and I'm going, that's in the Bible. Like what? And then they say, oh, the Bible's bunk, and it's been disproven. They say all kinds of
Oh
stupid
yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
in my classes, but it just really cracks me up because I'm like, how can you even have an objective moral reality when you're just chemical reactions?
Exactly.
Like you would literally be nothing.
Exactly.
And actually, do you guys watch oh shoot, what's that guy's name? Frank Turek from Cross Examined.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, I've seen. I mean, I think I don't agree with his philosophy across the board, but no, he has some outstanding points.
Yes, and I agree with you because he does endorse Hugh Ross. I don't endorse Hugh Ross.
I love Hugh Ross, but go on.
I'm sorry. I'm not. He's an old Earth
It's okay.
creationist, and
It's fine.
I've seen some of his debates, and I'm not saying that he's not a Christian. I think that
Mm.
he's just very misled by information, and there's a lot of that going on with like he's trying to mesh science. And I'm going to say this in the wrong way, but he's trying to mesh what what everyone believes, what the majority believes, into Christianity.
Well, and I would go as far as to say there are some attempts to understand Dr. Ross is a special man. He does have his own a few of his own personal struggles too, and certainly personality wise. But he's brilliant, and he does his goal is to try and reconcile, as he would put it. And I'm not trying to play advocate here, but as he would put it, reconciling both natural and divine revelation, essentially.
Yeah. Did you ever watch his debate with so it was him and Walter Kaiser versus Jason Lyle and Ken Ham?
Yes, I did. Yep, I
Yeah.
love that debate. Absolutely. It was wonderful.
I did too, and I thought, no offense against Hugh Ross, but it really exposed how much he doesn't actually believe in some of the major premises of the Bible, like he doesn't believe in a global flood.
Oh, I don't either, and I don't think there's necessarily a reason to, but we don't need to unpack that here.
Oh, okay, yeah. But anyways, but I like Frank Turk. I think he has some great points that he argues. Like, I think it's funny that a lot of the Christian debaters that I watch, they all have kind of like their MO of what they debate on.
Oh yeah, they have their genres and their niches and their
So
arguments.
Frank Turk and I thought he had some excellent ways of putting moral objectivity. Like when someone asks him, well, what about killing in the Old Testament? He goes, well, you're not God. I'm not God. Like, he's the one who created us. He kicks out of here if he wants to. And I thought he had some great reasoning to show that, it's all on the philosophy side,
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why I follow a bunch of different Christians who argue on a bunch of different points. Like I follow some astronomers, some geologists. I follow a bunch of people, and he's one like Ravi Zacharias, actually. Which so sad.
I miss Ravi. Yeah.
Oh man,
I miss him.
But you know what? His legacy will live on because all his YouTube videos are still up and running.
That's true. And there was very few better orators, and I do mean that specifically, as in actual people able to deliver speech with such poignance, emotion, and sincerity as Ravi Zacharias. He truly was an incredible gift and will be missed.
I have to agree with that. He just sometimes it was. I can't even think of the words, but yeah, I just liked how he spoke. He
was just magnanimous. You just couldn't kind of not fall in love with him as he spoke. It was an incredible gift he had.
Yes, he was definitely very, very, very good. And actually, how long did he pass away? Just like a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah, not that long ago.
It's about a month ago now, I think.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it was the very beginning of June, I believe.
Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, it's interesting, things that we're talking about in the Rosses and the Ken Hams and everybody. One of my biggest issues with the controversies between the two sides, right? Of like, I have less of a problem with the Hugh Ross versus Ken Ham split than I do with like Francis Collins and like BioLogos. Because that group is really starting to blur the lines a lot. Not just, okay, we have some differences of opinion and this and that and whatnot. It's becoming much more of a, oh well, it's just kind of it's much more of just a metaphor. Everything, not just like Genesis argument. It's like the Bible is a metaphor.
Yeah, they take it to a real crazy level. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't.
And that's where I draw the line, because ultimately, my ultimate conclusion is, at least currently, is that we're all wrong. It's on something. Like, there's no way that any of us actually understand all of it in its entirety.
Absolutely.
If we did, we wouldn't be having this conversation. right?
Absolutely.
Nobody can. We're being shown things until the end, and then once we go the other side, then we're still going to be learning more stuff. So obviously, we're not going to know everything. So
Absolutely.
I just concede that I'm going to be wrong on some things, right?
Mm.
And other people are, and it ultimately boils down to different things in terms of whether or not I believe we're on the same side, right?
Mm.
Well,
The
there is also the promise that the Spirit of truth will guide us into all truth. And that might sound a little over the top, but I know I wouldn't be nearly as far into truth as I am now if I hadn't believed that promise. That's in John chapter 15 or 16.
But he also doesn't say that he'll explain everything to us. So we
right,
also
and I was speaking more. I was speaking
Yeah.
more on a kind of rhetorical level of like, no, like I agree with you, Nicholas, that I believe the Spirit leads us into truth. I believe with that 100%. Agree with you completely on. We have to have, if our minds are not open to being guided, then obviously we're never going to find anything as well. The the point I was more making in terms from a top level, the conflict that happens sometimes I think is exacerbated, just like, you know, on a different level, interdenominational arguments.
Oh,
It's
yeah, and
like,
I wanted to know
really,
what you were.
people, we can't figure out a way to like
Well,
resolve these issues. We're gonna like split and turn into enemies
just
versus like, I'm using it as an example, right? Because it happens so much. And I'm like, what the is going on? You know?
Well, Jess, maybe you can correct me on this because I think one of the primary contentions that kind of lies between young Earth and old Earth is the idea that there could be animal plant death before the fall. Is that kind of a big one?
Well, from what I've seen, because I have not actually watched a lot of old Earth creationists, so
Okay.
I can only speak on a couple of points.
Okay.
But some of the things that I heard was just basically, it's almost like they're kind of constraining God. Like when I was watching that debate with Hugh Ross and Walter Kaiser,
Uh-huh.
they were talking about when a day was created
Right.
and how there's no way that Hugh Ross and Walter Kaiser said that there was a sun prior and that God just replaced that sun because there's no way that he could have put a just brand new sun in there on day 3 because that would have caused all kinds of fluctuations and it would have ruined all the lines of science. And I'm going, you're actually constraining God now. So that's the reason why I think that there's kind of a
Oh,
bigger divide.
I don't remember
Not
that part. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Maybe I should go back and watch it. I mean, I remember Hugh Ross's dissertation as he unpacked Genesis 1. And going through, how he kind of viewed from the frame of reference. And by the way, that was the biggest thing that struck to me. If Hugh Ross had said nothing else, including all of his other interpretations of scripture, the one thing he would have said that actually would have pretty much stuck with me no matter what was understanding frame of reference, and particularly in the interpretation of scripture. And that's kind of why I ended up gravitating towards the local flood as opposed to the global flood. I mean, I'll just give you my quick little take on it, just so you know how I look at it. Is that from a naturalistic, atheistic level, none of them believe we had a global flood at all. They don't believe that there's any evidence for it. And of course, the young earthers have things that they say is evidence for it, whatever the debate goes on. But for me, I don't think that I need to essentially believe in a global flood. And if I don't need to believe in it essentially, and it makes it easier for me to bridge a gap with an atheist contender, then it might be more beneficial to take it. Now the reason I gravitate towards the local flood, aside from the fact that atheists find it a lot easier to choke down, is the idea that from Noah's frame of reference from which the book is being written, Noah describing the entire world is only what he could see, unless you're claiming the frame of reference is God. But God's not the one narrating the story. Noah is, and Moses is repeating the story through the eyes of Noah. So if that was the case, Noah would not be in outer space able to perceive the entire globe covered with water. He would say, just like Solomon in 2 Kings, when it says the entire world came to see Solomon. And basically it goes down later on the passage. You see, it was just the major nations in the area. When it said the whole world, it wasn't actually talking about the whole world. It was talking about the known world. And we could understand that from Hebrew literary hyperbole, that they could likely have been doing the exact same literary structure inside the tale of Noah. So the claim of the entire world is simply really saying that this is the world that Noah knew. And in fact, I would almost say that the apostles believe this too, because I believe it's Peter, I think it's 2 Peter, that said that God sent the flood on the world of the wicked. He actually qualifies what he defines as the world. So I almost think the apostles might have even agreed with my interpretation.
Yeah, but okay, so I'm gonna have to interject on that one because I would disagree with you on your interpretation because it was clearly delineated that the whole world was evil, save Noah.
Yeah, the world of the wicked. Yeah. It says he sent the flood on the world of the wicked.
No, I'm saying that the entire world was considered wicked.
Well, bro,
except for Noah, his sons, and their wives.
Yeah, and the Genesis account can't be from Noah's perspective because it starts before Noah and continues after Noah. And Moses had a very direct relationship with God. Plus, we're looking at some of the details in the story, like that he needed to wipe out all of humanity and all of life.
Well,
that was what God's choice was.
Hold on.
So there's just
wait.
Well, I just want to finish my sentence.
You guys are rushing past a lot of things.
Well, I just want to wrap up what I'm saying real quick, and then
you're creating very, very fast. You're gish galloping me.
Sure, go ahead. Speak.
Okay, you first of all, you think that mankind, and I again, young Earth perspective, but you think mankind actually did disperse across the entire Earth in that short period of time, like the whole world, like even across the oceans, across into the other continents, like to
okay, hang on. Let's think about that one for just 1 second here. Because I think, my friend, you might be not thinking all this one all the way through, which is unlike you, sir. I'm surprised.
6,000 years. 6,000 years is enough time for humanity to populate the entire known world.
Hang on. So, Smokey, let's think about this logically for 1 second. So, I know you're a smart human being, so let's think about this. Okay. So, how many in 1800? How many people do you think were on this planet total?
Yeah, I don't have that stat in front of me.
Okay, it was like 1.2 billion.
Okay.
How many is it now?
It's about 7 billion.
Yeah, about 7.5. So the argument that now go back to
that's not good numbers.
Hang on. Now go back to the time of Christ. How many people do you think were on the entire planet estimated in the time of Christ?
I don't know. It's probably a few hundred million.
It was about 300 million. Yep. So when you think about this from a time perspective, the world population didn't spike that much between time of Christ, just as an example, through till the 1400s or so, right? And then it started to slowly creep up a little bit, and then in 200 years we've gone from 1 billion to 7.
Right.
So my point is that you have to think about this from a number one. Obviously, the spike can happen. The spike can happen. Number one. That's point one. Point two is you're also forgetting that we're talking from the young Earth perspective. There's no less than 2,000 years to work with between Eden and Noah.
Actually, right? Smokey, I need to respond to John really fast.
Okay.
So, John, you're actually wrong because in 1000 BC, there could have been actually a little bit less than 1000 BC. There could have been 50 million people in America. So this is not
okay. Well, wait a minute. Okay, wait a minute. Okay,
so we can't really necessarily go by population necessarily because out of those 53 million, there was only about 6 million left. By the time, actually, I'm sorry, this is actually this is like 80. But when Columbus actually showed up and all the others and the Spaniards and stuff like that, they killed what is 6 million minus 53 million. That's actually the low number. They think it might even been 117 million. Whatever that percentage is, that's how much was killed out by war, disease, mostly disease, actually. So we can't necessarily go by numbers, but we can go by history. We can show that the world is historically young because there's massive
Well, no,
gaps.
I'm not disagreeing with you on that. I was just talking about it. I was mostly addressing the point of could the world be populated in
Oh,
the
it was
the
probably
time the time window that we're talking about.
Can I backtrack to that just a little bit?
Yeah, sorry, Smoke.
I just, it's fine, John. I understand your point. Certainly 300 million people turning into a billion and a billion turning into 7 billion is not actually a big stretch in terms of numerology. However, a few thousand people turning into a million is a much bigger stretch than a few hundred million turning into a billion. It may not seem that way, but just in the way of how we would reproduce. If we have
from the modern perspective, yes.
Yes, well, that's what I'm saying. If you have a lot of people and they're all reproducing, of course, you're going to have a quicker spike. If you have a smaller population, you're not going to have the same type of spike.
Ooh.
It's going to, and I know I've heard the young Earth arguments saying, well, look at how fast we grew from the 1800s to now. Okay.
That's not my argument, Smokey. It's
No,
different.
but it was John's argument, and that's why
it wasn't my argument. I was you making an example of the fact that it's not an unrealistic.
If I could, then just to bring back to the flood thing, because I was kind of challenged on that. Can I ask a question? Maybe you guys will give me that, because this was a challenge when I did hold young Earth creation.
Oh, okay. Sure. Oh, yeah.
After the flood, there were still giants. How?
Well, how does giants really? I'm not sure what the big deal with giants is, because it says that there were giants in Genesis before the flood and after.
And after.
Giants has nothing to do with anything when it comes to the population. All right, so you've got 8 people that repopulate, and I watched the entire 23-part series from Answers in Genesis. And I'll tell you one thing: we reproduce a lot faster than you think. In the drought, Joseph's drought, when Joseph was in Egypt, there could have been between 5 million to 10 million males just based on genetics in the world at that time. And you asked, because I wanted to address this earlier, you asked, how could people spread out that fast? Well, here's a counter argument. If Noah could build a gigantic ship, right, a big ark that withstood tsunamis and the world breaking apart, and they survived, they're going to pass that knowledge on, because Noah lived to be 950 years old. He was 600 when the flood happened. That means he lived 350 years after that. Shem lived another 400 years after that, because I think he was 100 when the flood happened. I lied, 500 years, because he was 600 when he died. All right, so they would have passed on a lot of their knowledge. And the thing is, why would you not pass it on? Well, so it's absolutely possible that they could have actually went places very quickly and then came back very quickly, because in the drought of Joseph's time, it says the whole world, all the world experienced this drought, right? And I was doing some historical research on it, and there are massive markers of a massive, what they call a mega drought. This is what evolutionists call it. They call it a mega drought that happened about the time of Joseph.
Well, but
and it happened throughout the whole world, and all the lands came back. So, and I know you have a really good point about.
Well, wait a minute. Hold on. It says the whole world came to Egypt to buy food. So does that mean Australia was coming to Egypt to buy food?
Well, okay. So we don't actually know if there were people. It depends on. So we have to look at what evolution says, that agriculture was established and a state. Because I would say that there are probably sites out in Australia and probably even in middle America and like far east India and maybe way, way, way north Europe, where those people probably died out, but they were not an established government. They were not a land. They did not have a king. They may have just been a collection of villages. And they probably did die out, because it says all the lands came to Egypt. And then when it specifies land of Egypt and then all the world, and it says all the lands came to Egypt. So when it's talking about that in Solomon's time, we cannot actually say that they did not come over from the Americas, and they did not, because Australia is infinitely closer than America.
So when it said the whole world came to see Solomon, the same thing, like the whole world came to see Solomon?
Well, we're not sure. That's a different section, but
no.
There's something I got to call Smokey out on real quick, because there's at least 1,500 years before the flood, and Smokey's saying like, well, did people really go all over the world?
Guys, how long? All right,
Let me
hold on.
finish. Let me finish. Let me finish, Smokey.
This is
Let me-
philosophically embarrassing at this point. Seriously, I'm sorry, but I mean, I understand where you guys are coming from, but
No.
my
I've
questions
got
aren't
to
even
call
getting
you out on
answered.
your own words.
My
real
questions
quick.
aren't even getting answered. But go ahead.
There's too
Yeah, just
many
let her finish.
questions, but here's the thing: is that then in a shorter period of time, you're using the idea of people being in Australia to refute us, but a moment ago, in a longer period of time, you're using a short time period to say people wouldn't have spread out yet. So it's just inconsistent
No,
with yourself on that
because
one.
I'm trying to approach it from your guys' perspective. I don't share this perspective. I'm posing you questions in your view to try to reconcile. Because, like, if I was just an outsider, not even a theist and atheist, these would be some of these challenges. I'm challenging it inside how you're viewing it.
So, Smokey, let me ask you a question. The removing, what is your, I'm going to just, I think I know the answer to this question, but what is your number one reason you think that the global flood is invalid?
The nature of Jewish hyperbolic literature. This is not really, I mean,
well, this falls into what I just said about scholarship earlier.
Yeah, I mean, if you actually do look at the way the Jews wrote and the way they talk, and by the way, if you're willing to at least give the Jews credit for the fact that when they were writing passages the way the atheists associate as genocide, that it isn't genocide. It's Middle Eastern hyperbolic war poetry, as was the standard of the day. And by the way, had a function and a purpose. These prose were not just written to be held in the empire and kept there for posterity. They were sent as emissaries to the nations that were going to be put under attack. And what would happen is, oh my gosh, the army of the Lord and the Hebrews are coming. If we believe we're going to lose, we should flee. If we believe we're going to defy the holy God and his people, we're going to stay and we're going to suffer.
But you just said that war was a hyperbole, like it was poetry.
The poet,
it was not poetry. We actually have evidence of this in the record of these cities when they.
I know, madam. I don't think you're actually understanding what I'm saying.
Well, but you said that this war was poetry, and I hate to.
I said the poetry that they sent to the emissaries, talking about what they're going to do to them, is a standard cultural dynamic for the time. And this is something that all nations there did. This is something we have records of many other nations doing, where they would, just like when right before we go onto a football field, we say, we're going to go slaughter them. I mean, we don't mean we're going to go onto the field and commit murder.
But Smokey, hold on, Nicholas. But Smokey, because I literally just, because I'm actually setting up the flood from Noah all the way up to Joseph. So I'm tracking all the patriarchs. I'm tracking the ages that they had their sons. And
I don't know if I believe those are ages or if we can even decipher the numbers. We don't actually know the base number system the ancient Hebrews were using. So it's kind of a bit of assumptions.
It actually does say the numbers.
But no. Hold on. Wait, are you a King James onlyist? Are you a King James onlyist?
Yes, I am.
Okay, then that explains it.
I don't know how that explains it.
But it explains all of it. That's why we're never going to see eye to eye on this, because you won't respect my knowledge of the Greek or the Hebrew. It's
not respecting your knowledge. I've actually done research into, when they wrote out numbers, they wrote them out letter for letter, right? And each letter actually had a numerical value. And this is not something that's been like, it's actually been researched since the 1800s.
All the scholars admit that ancient Hebrew numbers are very hard to decipher. In fact, there's certain passages, including talking about, I believe, Saul's number of horses. Not
all of them, Smokey. Not all of them. All right, so you can't.
We're talking about the most ancient ones in the book, but okay, whatever.
No. And I'm talking about scholars who disagree, and there's a good majority of them that.
I'd like some references on that, probably.
All right, I'll give you some references, but just hear me out really fast.
I'd like a reference for a King James version only scholar too, if you have one of those.
Well, I'm not King James only. Just real quick, I think we should make sure we know what presuppositions the scholars are coming from, before we decide which scholars we think are more valid.
No, I don't need
But,
that. I just no. I just need their
No, you
arguments.
need-
I
you
just
need-
need their arguments. I don't care
Actually,
what their validations are. I just need to see what
Smoking,
their arguments are.
no, it's not their arguments. You need
Wait,
to
but
see
the validations are what validate the argument. So why would you go
No,
with an invalid argument? Why do you not care about the validations?
I need to
can't follow that.
preview the arguments. I don't care about the source or what
Well,
credentials they have. I care
well,
about
what
what
version-
arguments they're making.
Well,
I
then
would
what
like to see
version
the
do you think
arguments.
is correct, Smokey? Because I need to get like a basis here. What version do you think is correct?
What do you mean? What version do I think is correct?
Well,
All
there's-
versions are valid. All versions are valid.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about anything past the King James, you've got some issues there because they've
Okay,
actually.
well, what does the person in India read?
Well, I have no idea. I don't live in India.
See, this is the problem. I can't do this because the King
No,
James only.
here
You
the-
guys are like, you
when
have
we're
to read it in this, so everyone's got to learn King James English to understand God. I mean, it's
No,
almost as
not
bad as the
English.
Muslims.
Oh, hold on. Don't try to put presuppositions on us. I'm not saying King James English. Did you know that there's King James in other languages?
Oh, so
Okay.
they have to read it in King James English in their languages?
No, I never said have to. I think personally it would. I don't think someone can't be saved off of a corrupt version of the Bible. All right. But what I'm asking you is,
Wait, so you're saying they're all corrupt?
I didn't say they were all corrupt. Don't add words to what I'm
What?
saying.
I'll say that. But no, there's two different kinds of King James onlyists. I'm not sure if shadowdancer is the kind you're assuming she is from what she's saying.
The thing is that he doesn't even understand provenance, right? I'm trying to tell you about provenance, right? There's the things called the Antioch scrolls and the Alexandrian scrolls. Which one do you hold by? I hold by Antioch. Do you hold by which one do you hold by?
I don't need to hold by any of them, madam.
Well, you should. Then where do you get your Bible from?
I get my Bible from the collective cross-referencing of 5,000 plus ancient manuscripts and the
And where did
verifications.
those manuscripts come from? Antioch or Alexandria? You should know.
Do you
this.
not know about textual criticism of the New Testament? This sounds
I
like
know
we're
what
having two
I know
different conversations here.
Yes, I know textual. Trust me, I've watched a ton of videos on this.
Okay.
Are your manuscripts provenance? Provenance means you have a set line of where it came from in history. All right, we can't just trust some Bible that somebody wrote. We need to have provenance. I mean, we need to know that it was passed down from this person to this person to this person. Correct.
This is very confusing logic, but I'm going to let you go with it. Okay, go ahead.
But where else do we get our Bible? How do we know that our Bible is accurate? Any version, all right? Any version. Just work with me on this.
Have collected over 5,500 different ancient manuscripts from all over the world. We have cross-referenced them to each other to find out whether or not they verify what. See, here's the problem. Here's the problem with your version.
No, I need to, and hold on. Work with me on this, all right? I'm going down a line here.
I'm
right
about
here.
to tell you a huge problem with your
I know,
version,
but
that you have a
tell
verse
me-
that doesn't belong in the Bible.
No, I did. Oh no, hold on. You're confusing and combining.
No, you have a verse that doesn't belong in
Okay,
your
all right,
Bible.
hang on.
I
Time
didn't
out,
say
you two.
that.
Hey, hang on, time out, you two. This is
Explain 1 John 5:7 to me, or else I don't really have much else to go on.
Listen.
Well, I can definitely explain
Hold-
First
hold
John
on, Nicholas.
5:7.
Hold on. I did not say that my Bible has a verse removed. I'm saying newer Bibles do, and it is First John.
No, I'm
5:7.
saying, your Bible has an extra verse that shouldn't be there. And the reason we know it
1 John
shouldn't be there,
5:7?
yeah, we know the reason we know it shouldn't be there is because it only appears in 2 of the dozens of ancient manuscripts of First John that we have. And of those 2, they are the latest of all
they're
that
not
we have
ancient
found.
even.
And
Smokey's right on this point.
none of the ones previous have this verse in them. So this verse was clearly added later on as a subtext by scribes. It is not in any of the oldest manuscripts we have, and we have dozens. It does not appear until the latest manuscripts we have, and only in a couple of them.
Yeah, and that's an argument against King James being a perfect translation, but it doesn't really argue against which manuscript sources are better, which is what Jessi's getting at. But I have a suggestion that we actually switch back to a detail that we can agree on, rather than a topic that's just too deep and too long.
Sure,
It
whatever.
would just take
I'm
too much
game.
time to
I'm
go
still wide
into,
awake.
because all this textual criticism is an extremely deep topic.
Well, then we better stay away from the flood.
Because there's something going on with Peter with Peter.
Well,
2,
guys, let me stop
3.
for a second and just interject something real quick. Could you all, even if you are young Earth, all of this other stuff, type of things, even if you really, really fiercely do believe that that is absolutely true, would you be able to give me credit of finding a willingness to accept alternate interpretations for the sake of bridging a gap and creating presuppositions with atheists?
No,
No,
that's not the
because it
spirit
says
of truth. We have to
exactly.
be
God
All right,
honest
that's what I
based on
thought.
what's
Okay,
true.
that's what I thought.
We
Okay, go
cannot
ahead,
look for
continue. All right,
advantages.
great, beautiful. All right, go ahead.
Well, but the
continue.
thing is, Smokey, is that I actually believed in a global flood before I was a young Earth creationist. So don't try to make them synonymous.
Well,
Hold on, don't.
I just don't know how it's necessary. That's my issue.
It is necessary because Jesus actually says, "In the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of man." All right, and he says,
That's
"And
not
if
an
you."
argument to me, but okay.
But I think it's a great argument because Jesus is referencing the Old Testament as being true, and if Moses,
Literally true or
Literally-
hyperbolically true, as
Nope.
in his culture?
literally true.
Okay, then his blood and body is literally bread and wine. Great. Okay, lovely. You can join the Catholics with that. Great.
No, don't be an asshole about this. I'm being serious, man. I'm not a
figured
Catholic.
me out. She figured me out. I kind of am.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Hey, okay, everybody. So time out for uno momento. So I'm gonna have to change the title of this late
Oh, you
night
might.
extravaganza. I'm gonna have to change it because
The crazy
because
theists.
it's currently late night rant crazy atheists preparing for debate and jury rigging technology. Now I've got late night doctrinal, textual, and philosophical arguments between Christians who are deciding whether or not we're going to swing harder in our own personal back and forth interactions than we do against the atheists. So let's
You know-
just keep it on
You know,
context.
it's actually
What
kind
if-
of funny, John.
So
is
let's
that-
just keep it all into context, everybody.
No, let
Come on.
me give you guys something funny. You guys actually kind of laugh at this. When I was in my Rome and the Caesars class, we were talking about the beginning of Rome and all that kind of stuff, and I cannot remember the historian's name. I can find it. I can find my notebook. Anyways, this is about 200 years after Christ, and he wrote, "There's nothing more violent or brutal, I think, than two Christians arguing the Trinity." This is 2,000 years ago. So this actually I'm not trying to give us credence for arguing, but you're always going to have it. That's why we have.
I love argument. Why do you think I started doing this? You think I don't like argument?
But I would like us to get to Peter 2:3 because that we can address pretty simply and we can just kind of keep calm and we can just read this real quick. Let
Sure.
me see. But I need to find the verse. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the skies were of old, and the land standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. But the sky and the land which are now, by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and destruction of ungodly men. Now, I don't see the qualifier, the world of the wicked. That is just not actually in the text.
Maybe we have the wrong verse.
That was the exact verse you were quoting, I promise you.
When Peter says send the flood on the world of the wicked.
Well, it just doesn't say.
What does it say? What does it say?
It says the world, or whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water.
Yeah,
perished.
that's just a matter of translation.
Or
bro.
actually, it might be possible that world of the wicked exists somewhere else.
Yeah, it's just you're just reading a different translation. The fact of the matter is that there is a Greek qualifier there for world. It's not. It's actually intended to fix it. I'll have to actually pull it up probably in a couple different versions and maybe do some research on the actual.
Well, I can
Greek,
check really quick what the.
Well, go ahead. Okay, sure.
What
go ahead.
What I consider the most reliable manuscripts, which is the ones the King James is based on, and not that the King James is necessarily the best translation, but it does use the better manuscripts. And then
I mean, they didn't have as many manuscripts as we have today. Right? I mean,
yeah, they had the they had the ones that they cite, like one of the big ones they cite, there's a very large chance that it's a Catholic forgery. That's Vaticanus,
Right.
So,
for
Smokey,
instance.
can I tell you something?
So
So,
there's
Sure.
just a lot of detail involved here, Smokey,
Yeah.
that you're just taking scholars' words for it, and the research of
Well,
the
I'm taking
detail
scholars'
is where we
arguments.
disagree.
I'm taking scholars' arguments, and I'm waiting for you guys to give me one to the contrary.
Yeah,
I
but
gotta hear
when
it.
Jessi was discussing the different manuscript sources, you had no idea what she was talking about.
No, I
so-
did. It just doesn't matter.
but it does
because
matter
because she
you're
wants to
talking-
reference the manuscript
No.
sources specifically for her version, and I don't care.
No.
Because since then we've found thousands of others that we've used to cross reference the main sources that we had, which was the Greek translation, the Septuagint for the Old Testament.
Yeah, I'll check if the other manuscripts. I'll get out my paper Greek
But-
New
but
Testament
okay,
and
do we
compare
just-
this to the King James
But let
one
me-
and see if there's extra
Okay,
from other
let me ask you a
manuscripts.
question.
Okay,
Let me ask you a question, all right? You're discounting my information, but you're not allowing me to discount your information. Kind of seems like it's like a one for oh battle here, all right? Do you know how many manuscripts the difference between the Antioch and the Alexandrian scripts are?
Well, yeah, one was primary to one region, and one was
No,
primary
how
to the other in
many?
two different
No,
languages.
No. How many? All right, you talked about 5,000 manuscripts, right?
Well,
That's an
yeah, those are all the.
Yes, that's an accurate number. But I'm asking you, how many manuscripts came out of Antioch and how many manuscripts came out of Alexandria? I have done research, not just on the King James. I did research on just where the manuscripts
Okay,
come
well,
from.
clearly that I did not work into my repertoire as potentially essential information, but I'm
I
waiting
know,
for you to tell
because
me
you
how it
made an
works in.
assumption.
There's
Well,
no
tell me how
difference
it works.
between the
Well, then just tell me how it works in.
I'm
Explain
There's
it
no
to me.
difference between the manuscript sets here. I'm not finding anything else
But I'm just
from
asking,
other manuscripts.
but I'm just asking in general, I'm not trying to be demean or anything like that. Do you know the difference in the amount of manuscripts that we have from Antioch and the amount of manuscripts that we have from Alexandria?
No, and I'm not sure what relevance it has.
It has a massive relevance.
Okay, I'm
All right,
waiting.
stop discounting my information.
I'm waiting.
All right, the Antioch manuscripts have almost 5,000, and the Alexandrian only have about 50. And the majority of the Catholic Bibles have actually been written off of the Alexandrian scripts. And if you look at it geographically, the Alexandrian or the Antioch scripts come from the area where they were actually written. And we have 3, 4, 6, 7, depends on which one it is. Sometimes we only have about 4 copies of it, meaning it was like copy 2, 3, and 4, because obviously we don't have the original copies in any sense.
Naturally, we don't have much of
Yeah.
anything from the
Well-
first or second century. Well, really anything from the first century. We maybe have something from the end of the first century.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the same thing with actually anything. Like there was, I forget this historian, I think it was Pliny, was talking about how he wrote like 2 or 3 books on so and so or whatever. Well, we have 4 pages of it. That's it. So we're lucky. We are so lucky. Actually, I don't even say it's luck. It's actually God. But we have all these manuscripts for a reason. So when I was doing my research in the Bible, I wasn't doing it in the King James Light. I am King James only because of the research that I did. So, allow me to elaborate on how I did my research, all right? Because I've never been a pinpoint person. I was raised in a church that had the NIV, the ESV, all these other things. I believed in many things that were wrong about the Bible for many years. So I've done a lot of research.
Jesse, I'm sorry. I don't
ignorance.
mean to be rude. But I was waiting for you to connect an argument with the difference in manuscripts and the relevance that it had to the conversation. Could we maybe just get to that a little bit?
Well, yeah, because I actually more reference it to the 1611 King James version. I haven't done a ton of research on the next ones over the past 200 or 300 years, but I did take my new King James Bible and a King James Bible, and I put them side by side, and I read the book of Acts, the entire book of Acts, and there was an enormous amount of changes. Now, they were annotated in the New King James. That's the reason why I say I'm King James only, because there were a couple changes that were not annotated. When I go to an NIV, me and my mom used to sit there and read the NIV out loud. Well, she read the NIV and I read the King James, and she'd be like, Jessi, stop. That's not my Bible. Right, so it's not just one verse. It's not just First John 5:7. There are some ridiculous verses that are removed. So trust me when I say that I'm not just like, I did not grow up King James. This is actually a new thing. It was only about a couple of years ago that I changed my mind about the King James.
Do you believe the King James translators were inspired?
I believe that almost all the translators are inspired before probably in the 1900s. Before they started pushing out newer versions of the King James, I do not believe that they were inspired, because there's a lot of things that have been changed, but that's just my personal opinion. That's a whole other topic. And
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I would struggle with any actual justification for that, because I think the writers themselves refuted that. I'd have to pull references, but they,
Yeah.
in no way, shape, or form did they think they were inspired.
But we're more talking about Moses when he was writing about those prior to him. He wasn't doing it in poetry. We can actually recognize poetry. We can recognize history. We can, recognize this, and it's inspired
You
by
don't think
God.
Moses's writings are poetic?
When they study the linguistics of
Wait,
it,
yeah,
they
you don't think? Wait,
mathematically come out as
hold
being
on,
not
hold on,
poetry.
hold on. You don't think Moses's Torah and early writings were intended to be passed down orally in poetic structure?
No, because actually God told them to write it down.
Well, they're not in stanzas or anything. So
Exactly.
Well, I mean,
obviously
I
they're
don't know
not
about
poetically
that.
structured.
I think a lot of it does structure as poetry, and particularly the creation account. I mean, I don't know. I mean, especially the way that it's just structured. I mean, I don't know how to not see that as poetry, as someone was intended to be able to memorize that.
Because if you look at like when I was in my English class and I had to write poetry, my poetry had to be completely different than writing a technical paper on history. And so when you go read Psalms and Proverbs and like the Songs of Solomon and stuff like that, those are poetry. When we go and read Genesis and the next 4 books, they are history. They're literally telling you what they said.
Well, I agree it's in the genre of history, but I'm talking about its structure, its intention, the actual literary style. I'm not talking about what its genre is at all. Of course, the entire Bible.
I'm not arguing a genre. I'm saying it is history. It isn't a genre.
Yeah.
It is history.
Well, the only part of Genesis that I think could be at all whatsoever argued as a poetic structure would be the first chapter, because you go through each of the days, and obviously each of the days has a structure to it that seems pretty artful. So I see why someone would see it that way.
Well, I don't know.
And
do we think
the whole thing with the flood is very different than with the opening of Genesis. Where the opening of Genesis, I see how someone could think that it's got symbolism and stuff like that. But the flood account, the text just doesn't offer that. And that's just completely made up from outside the text, and it's based on a secular presupposition, and there's no other backing to that interpretation.
So if we find, I'm just curious, guys, if we did find something out in the universe that might give us if we think we've interpreted scripture a certain way and we discover something that maybe tells us we were interpreting scripture wrong, we still should cling to our literal interpretation no matter what, right?
But we haven't found anything. That's the problem.
Well, I don't know.
With you. I'll say yes.
Well, I don't know what type of geological evidence you guys could maybe help me with for a global flood, because I do struggle with that. I mean, I know there's lots of micro flood accounts all over the world, and they're all over the place.
Smokey, for me, the biggest one is what they've been discovering in relatively recent times of the continent-wide. This is on a global level, but continent-wide rock shelf.
The drift.
No, not the drift. Of how the rock layers are in sheets, literally covering entire continents. And we've been thinking, we've thought for years that we were looking at these. We were seeing like micro flood stuff and different things. Right. Oh, cool. Oh, there's no evidence for a global flood. Well, guess what? As technology has increased and seismic imaging and all this kind of stuff, suddenly they started realizing, what we in these underlying levels, what we thought were just microcosms, actually cover the entire continent. And then they went and tested in different places around the world and realized that the exact same things occur or in place around the entire planet.
Right.
And one of the biggest variables, and this goes back to the whole aspect of was the world covered,
Right.
is and I forget the exact angle of it, but in angles of rock layers that are formed like in the ocean, right? The way the water moves on it creates a wave angle at it's like 17 to something degrees underwater, and then above it's 24. I forget the numbers. It's too late for this,
Right.
but what they discovered was that whatever that ratio is, right, exists on the continent-wide rock shelves, just like it does in the ocean.
Right.
And in terms of from a geology perspective, there is no other known explanation for that other than it was covered by water.
Right.
And then the secondary piece, one of the other secondary pieces for me is the fact that there's, as you know, you and I were talking about. Hang on a second. You and I were talking about this the other day, of the fact that there's 304 million cubic miles of water on this planet. When you really contemplate that, and that's just the water in the oceans and on land, right? That's not counting the somewhere between 3 to 5x greater volume than that's inside the planet itself. They've now discovered with additional technologies. So to me, the whole premise of the flood happening from a just where's the water perspective is not that hard. That's the easiest portion of it to account for when you really think about what I've just said. 304 million cubic miles of water. It's nuts. But anyway, I just say all that as kind of a foundational piece of it for me of the flood. Is I know a portion for you is like old Earth aspect. Like the flood can be separated from
guys, understand.
old Earth
I'm not.
itself.
Hold on. Understand. I'm not like completely. This is the problem. This is the problem with this just goddamn debate. I'm sorry. I apologize. But here's the issue, and you guys just need to understand my stance. It's the young Earths that say you can't be old Earth. I don't care. If you guys want to be young Earth, if you want to argue young Earth because you think you have great arguments for it, go for it. Like I am basically just saying, don't be exclusionary about it. Like, because I think there's just as good arguments on the other side too. As much as we go down the road of saying lack of evidence is not evidence of lack, so on and so forth. Stretching out to the outer boundaries of what the atheists would accept and saying, no, it has to be this, as opposed to there is actually this other interpretation, and this is what it is, and it does actually align with the geology that you guys are focusing on, that you want to say that you want to prove. So, and tailoring the argument to reach them. Frankly, it could be young. In fact, I in no way, shape, or form have I said I know it's old. I argue old because that's usually what the atheists will agree with. And frankly, I think there's plenty of naturalistic evidence to show that. But I'm not exclusionary old. I'm not telling you guys you are wrong about being young, but I am saying that I should certainly be entitled to be either, and certainly not be judged in my soul as to whether or not I discern whether or not the earth might be old or young. That's all. That's ultimately ever been my argument.
Well, no, I personally haven't. I think it's rather obvious. I personally haven't taken that position that you just described, in the context of being judgmental.
I don't believe you have, but someone like Ken Ham, who says no, you cannot be a Christian.
That's the point. That's the point I was making earlier in context of, because I'm in agreement with you. Because you and I have talked about this before, and context a lot of my debates. I don't even go down that rabbit hole.
Right. I don't usually find it neat.
I don't think the rabbit hole is worth even arguing over in the context of the atheist.
Let me tell you something. When the atheist comes to me and says, global flood, you're an idiot. And I say, okay, idiot, what if I interpreted it this way and it could just be a local Mesopotamian flood instead of a global flood, but it also could be a global flood because of this. Now who's the idiot? Okay, well, am I really necessarily holding a belief stance that's going to condemn my soul, or am I trying to defend the kingdom of God?
No, that's what I'm
what's
saying.
important for your soul is what spirit you're following. So if you're considering tactics over truth, then that's far more dangerous than having false beliefs.
See, and but that's saying, Nicholas, that you know for sure you got your interpretation right. And
No,
by
I
the
was
way,
saying that the
let me finish.
interpretation
Let
is
me
less
finish.
important than the
Let me finish.
motivation.
Let me finish.
Okay. but
You are
not at all
saying,
what I
you
said.
seem to be saying, you know for sure you got it right. If anyone doesn't get it right, your soul could be in danger, right?
No, I said that the motivation for why you're choosing an argument, whether you're choosing it because you honestly think it's true or whether you're choosing it for a tactic,
I think
is
either could
more
be true.
important
I
than the
think either could be
interpretation,
true.
than the
Why am I
result.
not? Wait a minute. Why am I not allowed to think either could be true?
Well, that's fine if it's based on honesty. That's the spirit of truth. But if it's based on because it's convenient against atheists, then that is very dangerous because that's a different spirit. That's more spirituality is more important than these
Okay,
details of
well,
doctrine.
I led up with it. If you were listening, Nicholas, I'm sorry, but if you're actually listening to me, I led up with this saying, I don't care either way. It could be young, it could be old. I think arguing young generally doesn't do well against the atheists. That's just my perspective and my opinion. But personally, the way I believe, I don't actually go one way or the other. In fact, I'm not even agnostic on the matter. I just don't care. In fact, I don't care about which one is true. I only care about which one I can use to convince atheists ultimately. So
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm warning you against. That is far more dangerous than anything else we're talking about. That's one of the most spiritually dangerous things that you could possibly put yourself into.
So I have to believe one is true so that I can argue with the atheist which one I think is true, as opposed to believing either could be true. And
No, you have to not care which one is advantageous in the argument. Your motivation has to be honesty. If your motivation is anything besides honesty, that's
Yeah,
a different
my
spirit than
motivation,
God's spirit. God's spirit is
my,
honesty.
my motivation is bringing them to knowledge of Christ. And if a stopgap from that is an interpretation that they can't reconcile, I would like to give them another way of looking at it. And I see no way whatsoever how you could possibly even impugn a negative spirit into that unless you're really, really trying.
Well, I mean, if it's, I think I explained it pretty well that like the motivation has to be honestly.
The motivation is to bring
that's
people
more
to Christ.
likely, or that's more likely true.
The motivation
you have
is
to
to
be
bring people to
self-honest.
Christ,
That's
and I don't hold a stance. That's all there is to it.
Hey guys, sorry. My internet decided to go down and I had
That's
to go
okay.
and plug the mom in.
No, I knew you didn't run away or anything. Of course not.
Yeah, but I mean, bringing people to Christ. I mean, the thing is that.
So do I have to? Let me ask you something. If I convert someone, do I have to convert them to Young Earth?
Well, the thing is, we're not
No,
arguing
you don't
Young
have to
Earth.
convert them to Young Earth. I'm not talking about conversion. I'm talking about why someone would say something. It's like if you say something for any reason besides thinking with your honesty that it's true, then that's not the spirit of truth, and that's a different spirit. And a different spirit is, I mean, that's blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, is it not?
Brother, I just got to lay it on you. This feels like hyper judgment. This feels like super judgment. This feels like taking even the abstract to the next level and saying, I discern this as evil. Like you're trying to impugn my motivations into my honesty factor. And it is kind of a little bit insulting to my character. Maybe you're not trying to do that, but this is not, number one, this is not a philosophically sound argument you're making. It's not a biblically sound argument you're making. And it's trying to basically make an argument to cripple me from my outreach based upon your perception of whether or not it's honest.
Well, but Smokey, but you're kind of doing the same thing to him, though. You're saying the same. Actually,
well,
you really
he's not
are.
doing that to me. I disagree with that altogether. But
yeah,
I'm
no,
not judging what your spirit is. I am speaking about what matters, and you're the one who knows
is
whether
there two or more you can bring in against me too. I don't think this is enough. Let's.
Oh, no, I'm just saying that like
sorry.
Whatever. I'm not.
No, it's fine. You know,
I'm not saying whether or not you're being honest. I'm just saying that if it is anything besides,
I am a relatively rationalistic, old earther, cosmological appreciator, and I have fallen into the realm of the young earth KGV onlyists, and I am just the Daniel in the lion's den.
Well, it's not like that. I'm on the topic of just the spirit of truth, and
No,
I
I
mean,
get
if you're
Guys,
being
I'm messing
if
with
you're
you.
if you're being
I'm loving
totally
it. I'm loving it. I trust me. There's no part of me that is not enjoying this. I'm just
yeah, it's just a little. Okay, I gotta try not to be too loud here, so I'm having difficulty like
no worries.
competing to finish what I'm saying or to
Go ahead.
respond
Go
completely.
ahead, brother. Finish your statement.
But yeah, all I'm saying is that our motivation for what we communicate has to be pure honesty, or else that's a different spirit than the spirit of truth. That's all I'm saying.
I'm not being
No,
dishonest.
I mean,
I'm not being
what?
dishonest. And unless you can point out somewhere where I'm actually literally being dishonest, you're about ready to insult my character.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing, is that's where I would step into judgment, is if I say whether or not you're being dishonest. I was just hearing something about
Well, then,
that,
sir,
that there is
you have
merit
nothing
to
left
say.
to say. You have nothing
I was
left
saying
to
that,
say.
well, I heard that there was merit to it because it's more useful.
It
And
is.
that's what I consider dangerous, is if there's merit because it's useful instead of
It
merit
is.
because it's honest. That's
Okay.
the distinction I'm
Okay,
making.
let me ask you
And that's all
something.
I'm saying.
Let me ask you something. Is the truth, does the truth have more merit than fallacy?
Well, if a fallacy is truly
It's a real simple
Okay.
question, bro. It's right along the lines of what you've been pontificating.
Well, I
on
can't
for
answer that
15
in a
minutes.
yes or no question. I mean, a fallacy is a matter of assessing how it fits in logic, and truth is a matter of whether or not it's real. So there's no direct correlation. But yeah, I mean, honesty is more important than fallaciousness or not. I can say that.
Okay, I feel like at this point you're almost just kind of dancing around where I'm trying to get you to just kind of land where you're trying to land, and now you seem to keep obfuscating a little bit. It's a little bit of a struggle for me. It's a little bit of a struggle for me because what you've basically done is call me dishonest. Now, maybe you didn't intend to do that. Maybe you were just a little bit concerned about what my motivations were, but that's not what you did because I made my motivations very clear.
I'm just trying to
And
express what the spirit of truth is and how important
okay,
it is.
well,
I'm not even
you
trying to
don't
talk
possess,
about you. I'm trying to share information to
sir,
you.
Nicholas, you don't possess the spirit of truth. Okay, you don't have some Gnostic cling to knowledge beyond the rest of us. We're all on our path to
The
knowledge.
Holy Spirit has been put inside me. That's just untrue.
Okay,
I
well,
mean,
he's been put inside me too, and we're all on different paths. Okay, you don't know. You have it certainly right, and if you are claiming that, I would draw you to be very, very careful with Matthew 7:2, because whatever standard you meet out, you're going to be judged by. So if you didn't get it exactly correct, be careful. You might be held to that standard.
Well, Smokey, the thing is, we're not trying to say that people aren't saved just because they don't believe in the young earth. That's not what we're
Thank
saying.
God, because Ken Ham does, and thank God you're not like him. Thank you.
No. The thing is, I don't even think Ken Ham is trying to say that. What he's trying to say is that
he did say that literally in the debate which you referenced with me. He said, "There's no way a Christian can believe God would kill a bunny rabbit before the fall." He himself said it. I listened to it. It was, and not only did I listen
he's
to
talking about
it was disgusting. It was a disgusting statement.
It was not a disgusting statement.
It was
the thing is
to me it was. To me, it was a foul, disgusting statement.
Well, the thing is that now you're trying to make an arbitrary statement against us. All we're doing is just trying to reason with you.
No, judging other Christians as to whether or not they believe horse hockey nonsense about young earth being literally necessary in order to be a Christian, no, that's judgmental garbage. And I'm going to call it out for what it is.
Smokey, but we never said that. You're making an assumption.
Good. Well, no, if you're trying to defend Ken Ham, then we're going to have an issue. Otherwise, you can continue.
All right, I'll leave Ken Ham out of this. But the thing is, we not once have said that you have to believe in a young earth in order to be saved.
Excellent.
That is not what Nicholas was saying. And actually, most young earth creationists, that's not what they're saying. What their main goal is showing that evolution is not true, that deep time is not true. And that is where we are coming into conflict with you, because you believe in deep time and you believe in an old universe.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. And I believe we measured it through the microwave background radiation. I also believe we happen to live in a perfect place in our universe at a perfect time to be able to see our universe and take these measurements and take in the great glory and incredible immenseness of our Lord and Father. And you guys are just like, well, snap of the fingers, it was here in a few thousand years. I mean, I don't know why you guys just want to dismiss what could be 13 plus billion years of complex, interesting cosmic history for the sake of, I don't know, because literalism, I guess. I just don't
No,
understand.
it's the thing is that we're not dismissing it. We are actually using science to actually show that this is not true. All right, they actually found a star recently.
Oh,
Actually,
can you?
they've known.
Okay.
Hold on. They've actually known about the star for about like 70 years, lot longer, But since they've been studying it scientifically, and it's 16 billion years old. It's 3 billion years older than the universe, and they had to add extra data. They had to add other filters, remove data in order to make that star younger, just so it would fit within the 13.5 billion year universe.
That is being unpacked by several people as an actual light relative paradox. So there's some things to be unpacked there with that, but I don't want to get into that because I haven't even looked at full depth in the papers recently.
The thing is that you're trying to say that we have some kind of like arbitrary thing, that we're saying that we're just discounting science. We're not discounting science.
I'll tell you what, guys, seriously, young Earth will just absolutely pound this out of the park if they can do something about the measurements from the microwave background radiation. If you guys could find a way to reconcile that for me, by the way, you would convince me to be a young Earth overnight. Seriously, I'm not even kidding you. If you could find a way to reconcile young Earth reasoning for the microwave background radiation, I'm sold.
But the microwave background radiation is what? You saying that it's billions of years old, correct? Just correct me if I need to know your premise on it.
I would have to pull up the full paper. Honestly,
could I propose something about that?
Sure.
That it might not be a matter of well, I guess we're saying that the light couldn't have gotten here any faster than that.
It's not light.
It's not light.
It's not light. It's radiation.
Well, moving at
that's why.
but moving at the speed of light.
No, it's different. It's radiation.
Okay, this is just going to get embarrassing, guys. We know. I can go pull. I'm not going to do it right this second, but I can go. We know. Okay, I'm sorry, but we know with pretty heavy certainty that the microwave with background radiation tells us how old our universe is. Not only that, by the way, guys, it tells us a lot of essentials about the fine tuning of our universe and the necessity of God in its creation. We do not want to start dismissing the microwave background radiation as evidence unless we want to start getting rid of a lot of our fine tuning evidence along with it.
But let me ask you a question, Smokey.
I only care about being.
You're a different servant to the Lord, sir. We have very
okay, Smokey. So let me ask you a question. I have actually studied this. Like I said, I've watched Hugh Ross and I've watched Jason Lyle. All right, they are both astrophysicists.
No, they are not. Wait, is Lyle? Wait, no, Lyle's a bio person, isn't he?
No, he isn't. He's an astrophysicist.
Wait a minute, is he?
They're both. What do you think they did in an old Earth and a young Earth creation debate?
I thought Lyle.
No, he's an astronomer. They are literally there in the exact same degree. All right, and Lyle had an answer for this.
Might be confusing him with Meyer. I do that sometimes.
Oh, that's okay.
No, it's Lyle.
Yeah, Jason Lyle, like Lisle.
Yeah, Jason Lyle. Yep,
Lyle.
That's who she's talking about.
Yeah. Okay, so he actually had an answer for that. All right. And one of the things that you can actually reference is in the debate between just Hugh Ross and Jason Lyle, just the two of them, not the other one that I was talking about.
Right.
They were a guy stood up in the audience and he asked Hugh Ross and he said, if you were to see Adam right in front of you, we know from the Bible he was not created as a baby. How would you date him? Right. Well, Hugh Ross was like, well, we would use the liver because it puts liver spots. The fact that he's got all his teeth, they're not crumbling or rotting. There's no gray hair. He's got hair, all those kinds of things. And Jason said, yes, you're absolutely right if you use those. But if you use because what Ross was saying is that he would be young, that Adam would be young because we know that he was created brand new, but he was created as an adult.
Interpret that so differently. But anyway, go ahead.
But that's what Ross said.
I don't know. That's one of the things, madam.
Okay, but hold on. Okay, hold on.
Everything they
Wait. Hold on.
About to get to your question.
Yeah, let me get to the second part. So Jason said, yes, if you use those scientific methods, absolutely, you would get that he was young. But if you used bone growth, brain growth, height, and all that kind of stuff, you would get an age that's inconsistent. All right. So when we look at the micro background waves, the radiation that's in our universe, We absolutely do see it.
Madam, you
And
just
it and hold on.
for an example.
Smokey,
I don't even
hold
care.
on.
Okay, hold on. I have to run over. Give me 10 minutes. Okay, I have to run outside real quick. I'll be right back. Guys, continue. I promise. I'll be back. Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Oh, guys, so I found something kind of interesting. I was watching a video, and I know this sounds kind of stupid, but the channel is actually called The King of Random, and they do a bunch of random stuff. Literally, like they put stuff in microwaves and they blow it up and whatever. Well, anyways, they actually melted. Actually, they got magnets to the heat of like red hot or whatever, where it was like hot, and the magnetism actually failed on it. It was no longer magnetic. And then they tried to remagnetize it and they couldn't. So I was thinking about that. I was like, okay, so evolution says that our Earth was a ball of lava, a ball of magma, right? And then it cooled. Well, magnetism is actually affected by heat. So how do we have a magnetic system in our Earth if evolution says that that's true? I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm not sure what you guys think about that, but
I was calming down and asking Standing a question, so I missed it. Because
that's okay.
Yeah, because drawing a spiritual challenge to a brother is that's one of the more intense things I've been through in a long time, to be honest.
It is really intense. When I heard that in my Rome and the Caesars class, this is literally a document that we have where it's written in, there's nothing more bloody or more violent than two Christians arguing over the Trinity. And this is just less than 200 years after Christ, so we're always going to have these theological, debates. Cause 8 years ago, I would have been debating you guys on a couple of different things, because I believe falsely about things. But I was, and I want to make sure that he understands that I'm not saying that people aren't saved just because they believe in an old earth. That's not, and I don't think you're saying that either, Nicholas.
No, as what I was saying had nothing to do with the doctrine someone concludes, but there's sort of a couple steps in that. But I think it would be good for Smokey Saint to have me unpack that for him sometime without it being about him at all, just finding out what I believe. And then that would be a better way for him. That would be a better way for him to learn what I'm saying I believe, rather than for it to be because I'm warning him about something.
Well, and the other thing is
that I think is dangerous to him.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that, there was, I think it was one night, I think it was a Neff's channel, and one of the atheists was like, I'm not going to jump in there. There's 5 creationists, and it's kind of that way. Like, actually, until I found Standing for Truth channel and got a part of the team and just, started doing stuff with them. I was normally outnumbered, like 1 to 5, 1 to 10 sometimes. And so I get it. And it's better to have like a 1-on-1 or a 1-on-2 conversation. Even 2 is a little bit difficult because I actually got invited to another channel to go and talk. And I watched their channel and I was like, there's 2 people. So I asked him if I could bring another person on. He goes, no, we tend to do singular, just one person. And I'm like, okay, you are going to bring me onto your channel, talk about my belief and my faith, and yet there's 2 of you against me. Like, I am not sure if I'm actually going to go on his channel because I personally don't want to go alone.
Who is this?
That. I think this was a lot more intimate, what just happened with Smokey and I, but I hear that.
Is Smokey still here?
He said he'd be back in 10 minutes. It's the one that's Just Go For It. Guzman was on it just recently, like a week ago or something.
Guzman.
And he actually did a really good job. And being just 14 years old against 2 male adults, he actually held his ground. He did very well. Now, he made some mistakes, and I'm not saying that they were like super detrimental. It's just he didn't actually make mistakes. It was more like he didn't have knowledge in that area. And that's the reason why I messaged this group, and I was like, hey, I want to bring somebody with me. And I was actually going to bring Guzman with me because where he's strong, I'm weak. And where I'm strong, he's weak. And like, because one of the questions they kept asking him was like, because of course they don't believe in the Bible. And he was saying that one of the reasons why his faith is so strong, this is many reasons, this is one of his last reasons, was because we can see Revelation. We can see Revelation actually unfolding. And this other guy brought up some really good arguments. Well, but people thought that 30 years ago. People thought that 200 years ago. People thought that 500 years ago. And he didn't have a real sound argument, but I do. And I was just like, I want me and Guzman to go back to that channel so I can help him on that point, because I've actually done some research on it, and it's really interesting how often that they thought that Christ was returning, because that's what he was talking about with Revelation. And but I thought he did really good against them. But I personally don't want to go into a channel where it's just me and two others, and it's, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe
if
I
they're
will if they
cordial,
concede.
it's not that bad 2-on-1.
Well, one of the things I
Yeah.
find interesting about the whole is at the end perspective in conversations is I remember when I first started reading Revelation, it was the early 90s, and I was just a kid. But even back then, it didn't seem like, I'm like, man, how is this all possible? And then as I've gotten older, it's more and more things started to fall into place. And I've always been a bit of a history buff. And the things you're talking about, Jessi, on, people used to think, oh, it was coming, it's going to happen. I'm like, yeah, but it wasn't really possible. Like there were different factors that just weren't possible in those previous timelines, right?
Yeah.
And now, as we're looking at the world now, it's like, totally possible. Totally possible. Not that, like, what are the barriers to entry? And
well, it's funny because in World War I, they thought that was the second coming. And it's funny because the thing is that we have retrospect, meaning we can look back and see why they were wrong. And there's just reading Revelation. I mean, there's one major one that I've always pointed out to people, that it says the whole world will see, what is it, the false prophet or whoever, somebody resurrect, and it says the four corners of the world will watch. Well, the only way that's possible is with an age of internet.
Yep.
Where you can watch it. Well, in World War I, they didn't think about that. During the time of Nero in 64 AD, just 30 years after Christ, they thought that was the end times because of how bad it was. Yes, it did match some of Revelation, but it didn't match all of it. Matched actually only a very small portion, but they thought it then. And so it's really interesting. And I get what that guy was saying as his like contradiction or whatever, or his argument against Guzman. He's got a great point. They thought it many times. They thought it during the Cold War. They thought it during many different wars. During the war, it's not the war called Westphalia, but it's called the 30 Years' War. It happened in 1635, or it ended in 1635. It was a massive, bloody war in Europe, and it ended in the Treaty of Westphalia in 1635. People also thought then that it was the end of the world, that it was the second coming.
I'd like to propose something regarding this idea of the whole world watching a person come back to life. That the book of Revelation is a vision, and visions are spiritual symbolism. And
Are
so,
you guys still there?
for the
Good.
whole,
Did I give you guys enough time to get a head start against me?
well, I'm just
Actually, we changed the subject.
Oh, that's too bad.
The,
okay.
for
By the way,
world,
I just came back. But I did just now get here, and I pulled up that 2 Peter 2:5, and it almost seems like I was right that it says.
yeah, I'd like to hear that after I finish my sentence to Jessi real quick.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So the whole world sees like spirit entities, which like there are global spirit entities, and I think since it's a vision, that is the proper interpretation.
So I'll tell you this. So in Revelation, I think it's near the end of Revelation, the first chapter of Revelation. Is it John, right? John's the one that's writing it.
Yeah.
It says, write down what has been, what is, and what will come. What will come. Meaning, he talks about the seven churches, right? And that's the church age, and actually even talks about prior to that. And then he talks about this last 2 millennium. And then he talks about what's going to come after that. So it's not a spiritual thing. They were
Well, there's
God
a
was
dragon. There's a giant 7-headed dragon that comes out of the sea and stuff. I mean, it's spiritual symbolism. It's a vision. And that's what how the visions are. And I don't want to argue about it. I just wanted to propose that I disagree. I mean, we have
okay.
all our lives to think about it because, yeah. I
Well,
mean,
it was just
I
something that,
personally am
when
not
people
interested in arguing about it.
Yeah. Well, I guess it was an article that I read many years ago about World War One and, what they thought, because World War One was pretty bad. And of course, World War Two is really bad. So all of it together, it's actually in Europe, it's actually called the 30 Years' War. It's not actually called World War One or World War Two. Well, it might be in some more modernism schools and stuff, but some of the contemporary schools still call it the 30 Years' War. So they kind of consider it all one war. And that's the reason why they think that. And it's a decent argument against it. But, at the time that was a terrible time from 1914 to 1945.
That's very true. Well, I think I agree with you to an extent, Nicholas. There's definitely portions of it that for sure are symbolism.
Yes.
But there's other sections that are clearly not symbolic. And I mean, just for example, fast forward to the end, and I don't think it's symbolic that God is going to create a new heaven and a new earth. And I mean, it's I don't know, for me, a big portion of the overarching discussion of tonight, which y'all have been having on, age and all that stuff. I personally operate from the perspective. I personally think that there's the edges may be blurred slightly, but I think we live in the present, the now. I don't necessarily know if past and future actually exist, other than from a memory perspective. I think we actually all live in the now, in the present, and I actually think that is what eternity is the now. And there is no actual linear. The linear is removed from the equation. And
yeah, I agree. Linear will be removed from the equation. The analogy I use is instead of just a line, like time is now, if we think of traveling places, you can go I'm in California, I could go to New York, then I could go to Washington State, and then I could go to New York again, then I could go to Texas, and then I could go to California again. So it's and with time, you can't do that. You can only go forward.
Can I answer someone in chat really fast?
Yeah.
Because I've taken a lot of history classes, GBGA. Yes, I actually have heard that about Julius Caesar. Only because of his conquest and everything that he did. He was a mass murderer and very much an oppressor. And yes, I have actually heard that. I don't know if you guys saw that in the chat, but I was reading it and I was like, oh, yes, I actually have heard that.
The Bible says many antichrists have gone out into the world.
Many, yes, absolutely. And then think about how long that's been.
In the Greek, it seems to say that they come out from the church, but I could be mistaken about because there was no punctuation in the Greek, so you don't know when a sentence ends or starts for sure. But that's how it reads to me.
Honestly, I wouldn't actually disagree with that, because think about how many sects that we have. I didn't mean, you know what I mean, SECTS. We've got, and they started to split off within about 60 years after Christ, and then they continued to split off, and they continued to diversify, and then they came back together, and then they diversified after that. So I would absolutely agree with that. And there are many that are outside of that as well.
Can I bring something up just real quick? Just to finish.
No, I'm kidding. I'm just joking.
I really just want to finish Nicholas's challenge to my methodology and honesty. I'm just curious if you could tell me if he thought Paul was immoral or wrong in Acts 17 when he was validating the other gods in his message in order to reach out to them about the unknown God, because he was adopting a belief that he didn't believe in order to preach to them. So you seem to be fine condemning me. Would you do the same to the Apostle Paul?
Well, I'll just answer.
Or would you like to maybe just apologize to me for trying to impugn my character and doing so unbiblically?
Well, I might want to either clarify where I'm coming from, or just answer the question about Paul. or both, one at a time?
Sure.
So with Paul, he was completely telling the truth. He was speaking in terminology that they understand. But
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. He said, "You have all these gods."
Hold
and
on,
they
hold on.
exist.
Let him speak. Let him speak.
Well, he's
let
lying.
Him, let him,
that
doesn't
unknown.
matter.
All
right,
unknown
okay,
God.
okay. Hang on, everybody. Don't make me play moderator. Don't make me be James. All right.
What
Nicholas,
do you want to ask me? Why I think
you're
that?
up, and then
Okay, thank
then
you.
Smokey, you get to respond.
So yeah, that unknown God is also, like he talks about in Romans, that everybody knows about God. Like they know there's a creator and they're without excuse. And not everyone in Greece worships some unknown God, but they're like, there's some kind of God that we don't know who this God is. Well, that's the same thing Paul's talking about in Romans, where he says no one has excuse. So Paul was telling the truth, but he was telling them in language they understand. They were referencing the true God, but they didn't know what they're referencing. And Paul's like, I know who that is. Let me tell you who that is. It's the Messiah.
So Paul's pursuit is fine, and mine's still evil, basically.
Well, I mean,
He didn't say
he
evil.
was purely being.
Sorry.
I'm not speaking about you. Speaking about Paul, he was purely being
No,
honest.
I think you're
so
trying
it's
to
not on the
split
topic.
hairs to impugn the character of a brother. But I'd like to move on. Anyway, about you also said I was wrong about 2 Peter 2:5, right? About it saying that the flood was on the world of the wicked or the ungodly. You said I was wrong about that, didn't you?
That's what I saw. That's what
Okay,
I said.
well, I'll read it. If he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly. That's the ESV. Would you like a different one? I can do King James version, New King James. They all have the same.
Oh, did we lose everybody?
They all have the same, so you can just pick one.
Or is it just my chat?
Well, is that?
I'm here.
Is that,
I can hear you, Jessi.
Is that 2 Peter 3:5 or what exact
No,
verse is that? Was I in the wrong spot?
It was 2 Peter 2:5. So maybe that's where we had our messages crossed.
Yeah, and at first.
Did they stop talking?
Okay, so yeah, that is where. And at first I said that I guaranteed you that I was talking about the same quote, and then I did say that, well, maybe there is something else. And
yeah, that's
I was looking for it and didn't find it.
That was the qualifier I was talking about as to how certainly the Jews viewed the function of their language. They were hyperbolic people, hyperbolic culture, the hyperbolic language, and you guys all want to tell me to take it literal. It's not going to fly with me. And I know you can make cases. You can make cases that it's literally 6 days. You can make cases that it's literally the whole world. You can make cases to me that it's literally Christ's body is literally bread. Doesn't mean I'm going to buy it. Unless you guys give me some really strong cultural or historical literary validation for your interpretations, it's just noise.
And I stand corrected on that you misquoted. It was just
appreciate
a spot.
Thank you. Sounds good.
And then,
I wish you would retract your assault on my character too, but that's
what
okay.
I would want to ask is
no.
If we want to discuss all the stuff about 2 Peter between the 2 different verses and what the word world means, or if we don't want to discuss that subject.
It's up to you. So you want me to pull interlinear? I will.
Still talking, or is it just quiet?
Jessi, I think is her
Jessi
mic messed up? She can't hear us. What is going on?
Her mic is fine, but her speakers are obviously not working.
Yeah, she's.
So we need to tell her in chat.
Yeah, tell her
Would
in
someone
chat.
else be willing to say something to Jessi in chat?
Hold on, I can get it in private chat. Hold on. I think I got it.
But she might not be looking at private chat. In fact, I'm sure she's
true.
not, because she's reading live chat. So
hang on.
Okay, Jessi, your speakers are broke or something, is what I put in.
Oh, wait, I can go into the YouTube side. Hold on, I'll send it in the chat.
Well, Smokey, I would like to give some explanation of where I'm coming from, or what I was getting at, and then I'd like to hash this out. I definitely don't want us upset with each other, and I think the scripture commands us to hash this out. So let's see if we can do that.
I agree, and what I feel like you're doing, sir, if I could just be upfront and honest, is as I think you made a haphazard, quick judgment, and you were trying to impugn my character about something that I didn't even say, first of all, because I told you up front that I didn't care either way, and I didn't even have a belief one way or the other. And the only people I have a problem with are the ones that tell me I have to. Now, when I go to talk to an atheist, just like Paul, I'm going to approach them on their presuppositional worldview. And I'll explain to you how I also do this, because now you're really going to have a problem with me after I tell you this. When I talk to an atheist, I approach them on a reasoning plane of philosophical epistemological nihilism. I actually completely diffuse, disarm, and destroy all their attempts to establish knowledge claims, either for or against the Christian God. And therefore, I bring that to a philosophical level of which they are helpless. Now, when they fight me on these issues, and I use this to my advantage to help disarm their attacks against my God, even though I don't believe it, even as a Christian, I believe in certainty and absoluteness. But as a human, as a philosophical, functional, natural human being, I have to also define myself in terms that the atheists will be able to recognize. So, am I still dishonest?
Well, I didn't mean to speak either way about you. I meant to speak about motivations of coming to conclusions.
What's wrong with my motivation?
So I didn't mean to speak about the conclusion, nor did I mean to impugn onto you what the motivation was. But
you are. So what is my motivation? Because I made it expressly clear multiple times. So what is my motivation?
Well, I can only say what I heard that made me think that a warning would be good. I can't tell you what your motivation is. I can only say.
Well, yes, you can, because I told you at least 3 times. I told you what my motivation is: to bring people to the knowledge of Christ.
Oh yes. So yes. And I
so
did
what's
remember
wrong?
that.
So what's wrong with my motivation?
Well, we can't come.
Am I telling? Okay, let me ask you: am I telling a lie to bring people to Christ? Am I telling a lie? Am I telling an untruth?
Well, I think
that I believe this could be the way that Earth unfolded, and it could be old, and it fits with all of their naturalistic
interpretations. The first question you asked is
actually
related to what I was talking about, so I'd rather answer the first question.
Have it your way, sir. Whatever you wish.
The question about what I see wrong with coming to a conclusion based on the motivation of advantage in bringing people to Christ is that's not the same motivation as honest thinking brings me to that conclusion.
Honest thinking brings me to the conclusion that either is viable. And as I've just restated, see, you just kind of rehashing the same thing I've already explained time and again, but you're just doing on each end. You're just doing it on each end of the argument, and I just keep repeating the answer to each end of the argument, and you keep running. Why are you just running around? You do understand that what you did was say that I am somehow doing something dishonest by pitching to a naturalist that I absolutely have no issue believing the earth is old, and arguing with them from a shared presupposition of the universe. Now, you're telling me that if I don't believe that strictly, that let's say I was a young earth. Let's switch it around then, since you want to keep dodging. Let's say I did believe young earth. Let's say I believe
I'd
young
like to interject because I think we've come somewhere good, and I've been letting you talk, even though I think we've already come somewhere good.
I'm about to finish a question.
Okay.
If I absolutely believed young earth, but still argued old earth because I thought it would bring someone to Christ, and I know that those arguments existed, and I think those arguments might be better against that person, am I doing something wrong?
To that exact question, I would say yes, that is something wrong.
Incredible. Then you condemn Paul, sir, and this is now just sophistry. I'm embarrassed.
Well, Paul is speaking of things that were true.
Sir. I read what Paul said. You don't need to reiterate in your perspective what you want to now defend, your perspective of what you think Paul said. This is now about to get obtuse with me.
Well, the thing is that you don't need to be so angry, Smokey. The thing is
my character has been assaulted.
Smokey, you haven't. No, it's not that we're insulting your character. What we're saying is that we do not pander to evolutionists. We do not pander to their deep
Jessi,
times.
Smokey and I are trying to do what Scripture commands us, that we have to hash out our differences. Smokey,
I don't know why you're sticking to this point, sir. I'm struggling.
well, I think you asked me one very direct. I told you that I thought we
Yeah.
came to a good place, and then you asked me a very direct question and didn't like that answer. But we haven't addressed the good place I thought we came to.
It's a
So
bad
I would
answer.
like to
It's a
address
bad.
that.
You, in my eyes, you've condemned the Apostle Paul in Acts 17. I mean, whatever mental gymnastics you're doing to try to say that
I'm not doing
Paul
mental
was
gymnastics.
not using
I
someone
understand
else's
Paul's
worldview
words.
to talk to them, using someone else's theological perspective of pantheism in order to reach out to them about the one true God, and you're going to say I'm not allowed to use someone else's worldview argument because it's dishonest or wrong. We've lost the plot. I don't know where to go from here.
Oh, he talked
But
about
don't you think that you're taking the plot of
Jesse,
Moses away
please.
from everybody? The thing is, Smokey, you're doing the same thing. You're trying to reinterpret the word that
No.
Moses wrote. You're literally
Moses?
saying the same
We're not
thing.
talking about
Jesse,
no
we're not
one
talking
is
about
talking
Moses.
about Moses.
We're hashing out our conflict. We're not talking about doctrine. We're dealing with a very personal conflict, Smokey and I.
And we're not even talking about Moses.
I request that you
I
let
don't
us.
even know where Moses came from.
Because
But,
the thing is, we're talking about the Bible, are we not?
Yeah,
No.
but what does
And
Moses
we-
have
we-
to do
am
with
in
this?
this live chat.
But
But
what is-
he wrote the Old
Jesse,
Testament. He
they're-
wrote 5 books
Jesse,
of the Old Testament.
Jesse, hang on. They're these two are they've
We're
got
reconciling.
they're attempting to reconcile through a bunch of trash.
Well,
talking that's
no,
not-
no. The
all
reconciling.
I hear is that Smokey calling Nicholas a bunch of bad names, saying that he's
Oh,
evil, all that
madam,
kind of stuff.
you
and
might
that
as
is
well
not-
be an atheist with that level
I've
of
like
logic.
spiritually offended
I'm not an atheist.
Smokey.
Well,
I
you
know
might as well be with that level of logic, madam. No wonder you are King James only. This is embarrassing.
Okay, hang on,
Smokey,
hang on.
the thing is
Hey,
that
hey,
I've never called
hey,
you an
everybody.
atheist.
Hey, everybody! I'm about to mute everybody if everybody didn't shut up. This is going a little bit too far in the conflict zone. Let's all just calm down. I know it's the middle of the
I
night.
just want to
Let's
finish
all-
with Nicholas. I just want to finish.
let's all calm down. Hang on. Let's all calm down and just bring it back to normalcy. We all are the children of God, and we've been saved by God's grace. So we
Jesse,
all need to calm down and come to our reconciliation.
Will you please let me and Nicholas finish? If you want to address me, I'm happy to address you. But when you chime in with a sentence and there's about 8 things in it I disagree with, it's just gonna take away from this. I would really like to finish just what I have with Nicholas. I'll
Go
stay
ahead,
on
Smokey.
as long as you
go
want.
ahead.
Appreciate
Go ahead.
it. Okay, Nicholas,
ahead.
sir, please continue.
Okay, so regarding the Apostle Paul, he talked about an inscription to an unknown God. And that unknown God, like I said, I see that as a reference back to Romans, where everyone, not a reference back, but we see that everyone in some sense knows God. So when they made this inscription to an unknown God, that's the same knowledge of God that they were acknowledging. That the inscription is acknowledging that Romans sort of like all atheists know God on some level. So I don't see it as a pantheism that was engraved on there. The unknown God is that same thing that's talked about in Romans, that all atheists have some knowledge of God.
Was he using their false worldview to speak to them?
No, he specifically referenced that inscription, which is the knowledge of the one true God on the level that all atheists have, but they were acknowledging it more than an atheist does, of course. They were acknowledging it on an agnostic level. That it actually says agnostic, might be theon or theos or something. So it's literally the words agnostic God is what's written on there.
Okay.
So the God they didn't know, which does not tell us that it's pantheism.
Okay. So can I just read the passage and let's just take it. Let's just digest it real quick. Okay. It's Acts 17 verse 22. So
That's
Paul,
fine.
standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made of man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything, and he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and boundaries of their dwelling place. And he continues. So, is he pitching the case that there is this unknown God amongst all the gods that they worship, but this God is the real, true, supreme God? Is that the context? Or am I fair in that assessment?
Yeah, because he was telling them that he doesn't need their inscriptions. He says he doesn't need to be worshipped by temple and stone.
Where does it?
And he was taught, and he was referencing that same engraving.
Okay, so he says, "To the unknown God, what therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you." So he's not saying all the other gods you worship are false. He's not falsifying pantheism. He's not falsifying all their other deities. He's saying this deity you've been praying to, this is actually the real deity. He's using exactly what they view as truth, and he's bringing an extra nugget, a kernel through it. Now, is he essentially required to operate only within his narrow perspective of his worldview in order to reach these people? Or is he allowed to operate and expand his boundaries to include what they conclude as truth? Just help me reconcile that with your perspective. He's not falsifying what they believe at all in any part of this passage, is he?
No, because
but they believed in many gods.
No, but he's only addressing this unknown God.
Exactly, but he's saying this unknown God is this person. He's not saying all the other gods don't exist or they're not there. He's using their multi-god cultural system. He's pointing to one.
It'll get to Christ, and that will make more sense of it. If we're going to be really so much about this passage, but.
Can you? All right. The whole point of this is that I don't appreciate what I perceive was your rush to judgment to say that I'm not allowed to use any worldviews that I think might be coherent or useful to a conversation. First of all, I wouldn't argue an untruth because bringing someone to the truth with a lie is nonsensical. So I mean, it's not even something that's really even possible to be done. Because if I'm arguing from truth, I don't possess any lies. I only possess that which I verify and I know. That's what knowledge is, right? A verified true belief. Pistis in Greek, right?
I understand pistis to mean trust.
Yeah, confidence, assurance. Your highest level of confidence that this thing must be true.
Reliance, yeah. So when you trust something to the point of reliance. Or confidence to the point of relying on something that's
so let me tell you something. If again, let me now bring us back to the original anecdote. If I believed young Earth was true, I could be wrong, right? I could be wrong. Maybe I'm not, but I could be right?
Would
you agree with that?
Was true.
Is there a chance I could be wrong?
Well, if you're including you believe you could be wrong, then that puts a wrinkle in it.
Could some of the other smart people have gotten their interpretation right instead of my smart people?
That depends on.
Is that question really that hard to answer? I mean, even from a philosophical level, really?
Well, what I'm trying not to do is just go down an irrelevant rabbit hole, and we're.
Well, I'm just trying to. If you would just answer the questions, we'd get through this, brother.
I would like to step back to something that got skipped over, and since it was skipped over, I think that's a fair request.
Okay.
So just before you asked me that specific question, I think we got to a good place.
Yeah, and you said I was still evil. I know. That's why I'm trying to circle back to it.
Well, no. I interjected to tell you that I think we got to a good place
What was the good place? I told you that if I
Yeah, I
adopted
didn't
a
get a
different
chance to tell
worldview,
you because we got focused on this other question afterwards, which is why I say it was
bro,
past. So I want
you
to
answered
talk
the
about.
question. You
I
called
want to
me
talk about.
evil. I
Um,
said if I believe something and I use a different belief to try to bring someone to the truth because it's just as coherent, even though I don't believe it, even though it could be just as true, you say that's wrong.
Well, are you trusting it to the point of reliance? Is that the definition we're using for belief? This
It doesn't
pistis
matter.
from the Greek.
It doesn't
Well,
matter
it does matter because
because I could be wrong about either one.
well, if you think you could be,
If I
you
see
think you could be
if I
wrong, then you're not having the confidence.
bro,
And
if
you're
if
having
I
the confidence to the point of reliance, then you're relying on it by using
Bro,
that as your argument.
you are not following me. You are not following me. It doesn't matter. Whichever one you held to, whether it was old Earth or young Earth, you could be wrong either way. So, even if you were sure that one was true, you could still be wrong. So, if you approach someone to argue with them and you choose which one will face the argument better, you're not arguing against truth or for truth at all. It's irrelevant because you could be wrong. You're arguing what fits for the scenario, and either one could be true. But the one that could be true, that fits the argument, that's the one I want to use. And you tell me I am somehow immoral for that?
Where I thought we were getting to a good place was where
No, we're in this place right now, and this is where we have to finish it because I've made a challenge, and this is not rhetorical.
Okay, well, I'll. No,
Can you really seriously not lower your pride to apologize to
Okay,
another?
hang on, guys.
Pride, it's
Guys,
about
I think
honesty.
y'all need to hang on 1 second.
Incredible.
Hang on. Nicholas, you've
I
been
think
trying
I'm done. I think I'm done.
hang on, Smokey, hang on. Okay, Nicholas, you were saying you felt like you guys had reached a good place. Go ahead and say what you were going to say, and then we'll go back to Smokey.
Yeah, I just want that to also be on this table. I think that's fair. So, the good place was, I think I missed something that you were saying much earlier because there was a lot of chaos in how the discussion.
Nicholas, you know what? Let me just say this. I've made my case, and I've made it very, very clear and very strong. You can apologize, or I'm done.
How about you just let him speak?
Well, I'm just because Jessi, you are apparently really, really slow at cognition on these conversations. So please just let me talk to him.
How about you just let him speak? I've been listening this entire time.
I'm establishing my terms.
Let him finish.
Because I can just leave. I can just leave because I'm establishing my terms. If he wants to reconcile,
do you and I want that?
Sure, but he doesn't need it. You don't.
Leave?
You don't need an apology.
I would like Jessi to stop talking so that I can finish. That's what I would like.
And I would like you to stop talking so I can finish.
I gave you terms.
I would like you to stop talking so I can finish. Thank you. So, where I thought we were getting to a good place was much earlier in the chaos of the discussion. I missed what you were saying that because you really did think that both are viable, or because you think old Earth is more likely, that that factors into why you would choose that one. As I understand that where you're coming from is that this older thing might be the truth, and so because of that, this possibility means that you do not have a defeater, atheist. And that was what I missed originally, and when I noticed that I thought we got to a good place. And that was what I've been wanting to say for a long time.
That good place was ruined when I asked you the question, sir. And I asked you very directly. I said, if I argued from a worldview that I didn't necessarily believe, am I wrong? And you said yes. And then we devolved. And now we've gotten to here where I've made my case. I've presented it as pristinely as I possibly can. And now that you've said what you've said, I'm now establishing my terms to you, sir.
May I read one short part of scripture that shows where I'm coming from, and you can sort of judge me based on where I'm coming from?
I'm not trying to judge you. I'm trying to judge what you've said about me.
That's what I mean. I did not mean to accuse you of judging me. That was just a word choice. It was not exact. I would just like to read something that would help you see where I'm coming from, and you can judge based on that.
Fair.
Okay, so I'm just finding it real quick. I'm pretty much there. Okay, he's talking to the woman at the well. I take it you're familiar with the discussion about the mountain or the temple to worship at. And Messiah tells the woman, "You worship, you know not what. We know what we worship, because salvation is from the Jews. But the hour comes, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeks such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth." And what I'm getting at with that is that it's important that all the mechanisms by which people place their trust are truthful mechanisms. So if we're going to convert an atheist, it's important that it's all going in based on truthful conversion, that all the spirit involved is truthful spirit.
Okay. Which one is truth? Which interpretation is truth? Which epistemology is truth? Which interpretation? Which version? Which denomination? Who's got it right?
Well, I don't care about all that. I'm just saying that
No, I do. Well, you've made the case, sir.
the warning I gave was based on that concept that I just
Sir.
read, and it was just me trying to express something about the spirit of truth. It wasn't me trying to judge whether or not you fit into that category.
Are you sensing my frustration? Are you sensing it? Are you understanding like how incredibly I struggle getting abstract thought with the atheists. I really do. And I struggle philosophically with a lot of my brothers and sisters. I do. I have lots of fights. I have lots of arguments. By the way, this is not uncommon to me, but certainly it is very, very new online. This is something I usually do in churches and to congregations and things like that before they chase me out. But the point of the matter is that I think what you kept dodging, truthfully, sir, is that you want to judge my methodology based upon what you think truth is. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is that if you're being philosophically honest as a human being, then you're willing to admit that maybe your interpretation is wrong, that you skewed scripture, got something out of context, didn't quite study enough, was missing information. And because you are aware of your own weakness as a human, your own finite scale, that you might get it wrong, that you don't want to start telling people what truth is from the direction that they need to argue from, but let them discover it on their own. Because guess what? You might be wrong about the version and interpretation of truth that you got. And maybe you use that saying, well, I have to pursue truth. I have to pursue young earth. I have to pursue literal interpretation. And maybe you're wrong. But you pursued that, and maybe you chased people off because you felt you could only speak towards truth. And if there was a better argument or a different interpretation that a different Christian held, well, no, you can't touch that. You can't argue that to them, because that would be you arguing something that you don't personally believe is truthful, even though you, as a philosophical, free-thinking, finite human being, could absolutely be wrong about everything you've interpreted. So
but don't you think that you could be wrong with it too, though?
Absolutely.
I'm asking.
I'm not the one judging, madam. Try to keep up.
I am not the one that's judging. All I'm doing is
Jessi, excuse me. I'm right there with Smokey right now. We're doing very good. So are you done yet? Are you done yet, Smokey?
I am. That's good enough. I think that's good enough. Go ahead. I yield.
Okay, so I hear where you're coming from. Since you use the word "you" a lot, referring to me, it sounded like my perspective on where I'm coming from, talking about myself, is that God will, if I'm doing my best to be guided by the spirit of truth only, and so if I am incorrect and that drives people away, then God's going to need to have another tool or another part of the body for that, because I can only be the part that I am, and I can't be anything besides what my honesty is. And I'm speaking only about myself when I say that, to reply to what you were just saying about me.
Well, and I just want to ask a question. How come I can't agree and can't comment?
Because, Jessi, you can't keep up with the conversation. It's very frustrating.
No, Smokey, the thing is, you're being kind of an asshole and saying that.
I know,
the
madam,
whole
but you're
time.
being very infuriating, and you're being very
No,
frustrating to what's
it's
supposed to be a
not.
sincere
All I'm
exchange
doing is-
between brothers. And I
Why-
don't know
why do-
why
why
you
do you-
have to be heard right now.
Why do
I
you
do
think
not
that I'm
understand
trying-
why you have to be heard right now. Why are you
Why
talking?
why do you
Okay,
think that
everybody.
I'm trying to
All
be
right.
insecure?
It's now it's 3 o'clock in the morning for my time. I gotta get up at 7. So I think this has
Fair.
gone far enough.
Yeah.
I think we should all. I think it's all late. We're all getting a little cranky, and I don't think we should let this.
Getting,
Yeah.
bro, that ship sailed hours ago. What
That-
are you
that's-
talking about?
That's called diplomacy. The I do.
Smokey, will we reconnect? To
Nicholas, do you want to
hopefully
come
and
over to?
probably
You know what,
resolve this?
Nicholas? I'll go set up a stream right freaking now if you want to finish this.
I'm down with that.
Okay, I'll do it.
Yes.
I'll do it right now. Send me an email. Do you have my email? Just go to my channel. Just go to my channel. I'm gonna start
Yeah,
it
that's
right
what I
now.
was
Just pop
thinking.
in. Just pop in. Forget about it. All right, guys. Love y'all. Have a good night.
Later, Smokey. Good night, Nicholas.
Yeah.
Jesse.
Good night, guys. I love you.
I gotta
Peace
pass
out.
out. You guys are
Good
crazy.
night.
You
Sorry
guys are
about
Good
crazy.
night.
difficulties.
Good night, everybody.